it, and if it's good, maybe another sheriff will do it the same way next year. We'll see. So with that said, Dina, did you want to add to that, or?
We're just going to get started with Captain Smart.
Yep.
I'm going to bring up his presentation and let him have the floor.
So joining us, initiating it, is Captain Kevin Smart. Captain Smart, take it away.
Thank you, Commissioners. As the junior captain, I was tasked with kicking this off and put at the forefront. I wanted to welcome you to, I'm going to be discussing today the Operations Support Services Division. That is going to entail 5 sections within that. Hey, Dean, do we have a clicker?
That's not it. No, I don't believe we have it with us. Maybe somebody can run up and get one.
Okay.
I'll
about this?
just nod or point at me. Yes, I will be your human clicker.
We're going to be discussing the driver's license, records, the auto shop, civil, and then our 911, which also includes our 911 enhanced budget on that portion. So we're going to kick it right off with the driver's license one to start with. And we have some stats and statistics right up front for you we wanted to highlight, let you know some of the trends that we're seeing. In 2018 there, we had 56,000 transactions we were doing a driver's license, and then in 2019 that increased to 63,000, almost 64,000 there. And that 7,573 increase, you know, the driving force behind that is the Star Card implementation, obviously, you know, as we get prepared for our travel and whatnot. We did receive a reprieve for some of that for the COVID-19 issues that have arisen, and so we have been given a reprieve till 2021 to get those completed. However, you know, we have to remain cognizant of the fact that we did have about a month shut down there due to the restrictions. So we have a backlog of people who are going to be clamoring to get in our doors down there to get all this stuff implemented. So, you know, undoubtedly that's going to cause a workload increase to our future there. So I just want to keep that in mind for that center. They're going to be hopping down there and busy all the time. We did use that 2%, and we wanted to come in as flat as we could for our B budget. We have no $0 ask for beyond that 2% this year for driver's license. The focus was on our 3-year averages and our 3-year trends to make sure we remain very close to those same numbers. At the same time, we also took into account those increases that we knew from some of our utilities, you know, GARDA, shredding services, and those types of things to make sure we kept up with those. The biggest increase that we were pushing towards in this area was for our training and seminars line item. And again, we promoted 2 supervisors last year and an assistant, and so we need to just continue with some of our leadership training for them to set them up for success, and so that's where we focus some of those dollars from that 2% towards. We are asking for an overtime increase in this driver's license budget of an additional $2,406. The previous year's budget was $1,200. And again, this is just to move us more in line with the 3-year average, which is at 2,987 on a 3-year trend. Anything from that section that you guys would like to address at this time, or are you good to move forward with?
Okay, so you're basing the 2406 on the 3-year average?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I presume you're also factoring in, or at least paying some attention to the level of increase from 18 to 19?
Well, again,
in terms of volume?
Well, we did not add any additional for volume increase because we can only handle so many people in the door anyway. So, but I'm just saying it's going to be 8 to 5. They're going to be hopping every single day, and it's going to be stacked up.
Okay, fair enough. Go ahead. Thank you.
All right. Moving on to our records section. So for 2019, we had 6,884 records requests, 7,255 law report entries we'd completed, 8,533 inmate files processed. This public records request of 6,884, that was up 1,000 from the previous year. Our concealed weapons permits were 2,538 for last year. And again, we've had some significant increases. The biggest jump was in 2015 when it went up 1,344, and it's remained steady since then. I mean, a lot of that was spurred by the Sandy Hook incident, and then it was compounded even further when we had our additions of the enhanced license restrictions and needs to be compliant with other states to carry out a state. So again, these increases just over time, you know, they compound the already taxing workloads. And I know that there are other sections that are working very hard, but I just want to make that sure that we get that out there, that these people are there from the minute go, hopping every single day. Again, we're focused on closely matching our 3-year average across the board for our B budget. We do have an increased request this year of $4,788. That is attributed solely to this archive social software that we're looking to implement. Idaho records retention laws require that we retain every means of writing, and so this would be a social media cloud platform that allows us to keep, retain, and easily search for any sort of public records request from our social media stuff, website posts, Facebook posts, and Twitter posts. We'll continue on with some of our record stuff here. Again, the majority of that 2%, we focused it back into our training and line items. Again, we have mandated ILETS training for that section that's required to keep up the knowledge base necessary for us to remain compliant with all of our audits for that section. We have some succession planning that we need to prepare for, as we have an anticipated supervisor vacancy coming in 2001, fiscal year 2001. And we have, just continued leadership training for both the assistant supervisor and that future supervisor that we onboard. We do have some additional requests for this section that I wanted to note. I am requesting that we implement a $1 stipend for another training officer position. This would be creating an additional training position. Our current status on that is it currently falls to the assistant supervisor, who is also tasked with picking up extra overflow of work, providing ongoing training for our current staff, as well as maintaining the order in there. And so this would just alleviate some of the pressures of that and allow for a backup in the event that our first trainer is unavailable to take on some of those tasks. And at the very bottom, yes, we are asking for an overtime increase for this as well. And again, that increase would be of $7,465, and that is just to more closely match our 3-year average of $9,436. Any questions from that sections?
Any questions? Yeah, go right ahead.
Go back to the prior slide on the concealed weapons permits. Can you hear me okay, Commissioner?
Yeah, go ahead.
And Jen, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I know Sandy Hook took place in 2012, and for whatever reason, the request for concealed weapon permits went through the roof then. I think back then they were between 500 and 600 a year-ish. Well, you can see the difference, in 8 years. And, the help that I think maybe we put on 1 or 1.5 positions, not solely because of that, but, that overtime request, a lot of that need comes from this volume of work that's coming into them. And the number of employees, first of all, we don't have places to put them, and second of all, even if we did, we're just falling so far behind because of volume. That's one of the drivers, and in particular, the concealed weapons permits. It's just one of those things that I think in our particular community is a real driver for a lot of the workload in that office.
Okay, question. So when you indicate these increases, let's say for the OT or whatever, are you including that, is that part of the 2% increase in the operating budget?
No, it is not.
Okay, that's in addition?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a question on the stipend.
Okay.
The records training officer, so it's listed as $38,000. So is that $1 an hour for how many people?
For one person, so it should be $2,080, but when we submitted that with Tammy, it's a loaded.
Oh. Oh,
It's been updated on the sticky notes.
thank you.
So
Oh, I'm sorry,
40
did you have
40 hours
did you have the $30,000 one in there? Is that what you said, 30,000? Okay, no, yes, it's just $2,080 just for the 1 year.
Thank you.
Got it. Bill, any questions?
Yeah, this is not a specific question of you, but just a comment in general. Number one, this is not a normal year. I mean, everybody, I think, would acknowledge we're in uncharted territory. And this has got to be at this point, because we don't know what the expenses are going to be down the line. I mean, related to COVID. We just don't know. Nobody can tell us. So, number one, I'm not a big fan of just add 2%. Number two, I'm not as big a fan as, here's my 3-year average. this ain't an average year. And I think the 3-year average is instructive, interesting, useful, but it's not an imperative. In other words, because it's gone boom, 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 doesn't mean it's going to go boom. It could go boom. So I think we have to remember that. But I think 2%, I know you got instructions to that effect. I don't agree with that. I think it's simplistic and sloppy. Not that you did it, okay? So don't misunderstand. But then there's no criticism about what you've done. I think you've done a great job putting this together. I think the Sheriff's Department, I've gone through the book, and I like it. But with those provisos, those two things that I outlined before.
I will only just dovetail, you will hear that throughout the entire.
What's that?
You will be hearing that throughout the entire presentations.
Yeah, I know, that's why I just
Those are
thought
where
I'd
we
make
went
a,
off of.
I
and
just
so-
thought I'd make a blanket comment,
And-
not directed at you.
And for the record, the 2% cap is pre-COVID. Okay, when we established
Right.
that, it was before we hit the pandemic, so.
Sure.
But anyway, any other questions for Captain Smart?
All right, we'll move on to the next section. Oh,
Yes, sir. Dan?
Commissioner Brooks, just to address the 2% thing, I just want to be clear that, and I know that you understand this up front, you know, the commissioners, but the instructions that we were given was to operate within that 2% cap, so that's why we.
I acknowledge that, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
all right, we'll move on to the next section we have for you. Got our auto shop here, and this one we were able to be very flat all the way across the board. We used that 2%, we came in with 0 additional ask beyond that. Again, we did focus on our 3-year averages. You know, the biggest increase, again, we attached to our training and seminars line item, and we have just received a retirement notice from our supervisor, our shop supervisor there, so we're going to need to promote somebody, and in order to set them up for success, we're going to need to get them some leadership training. There's some welding and fabrication things that we're going to need to ensure that the next personnel can also take on a lot of those duties to keep everything flowing with the shop. Beyond that, we have no additional requests from that section.
Okay, keep going.
On to civil.
I'm sorry.
Well, I just want
Go
to know,
ahead.
the retirement, what rank is that?
Well, it's a supervisor position. I do not know the specific. Yeah, it's Will Stein. I don't know where he comes in at.
He's manages the auto shop.
No, I know who it is, but I'm just looking at our retirements here, and I
He's not
see.
listed.
Okay, good, that's why I'm,
Will he be
Thanks.
retiring in 2020?
He's retiring on Friday.
Okay, so that will be part of the 2020 budget.
okay, so that'll have to be taken care of this year.
All right,
Okay.
All right, on to civil.
keep going.
So, got 13,209 types of processes that they've done this year. Again, that's at max capacity. We've got our civil deputies out there serving at an average rate of 88%. And again, we have to take into account, the 12% there. You're kind of maybe wondering where it went or what it does. Well, that's still a taxing part of their workload. They have to serve those or attempt those 3 to 4 times before we can send those back as not found. So they're still out there making contacts and driving around. We have asked for an increase of $5,000 to this budget, and that is based on the soft code software maintenance that we implemented the program just this year, and that will be our ongoing maintenance costs for our future.
So does that line item shrink because you won't be using some of the other items that you were using?
Which, are you talking about for soft code here?
Yeah.
The maintenance?
Yeah.
No, we used the rest of that 2% in other areas, and so this is an additional request to add $5,000 to our civil budget.
I didn't ask my question right.
Okay.
You were using like 5 different programs that soft code was supposed to replace. Are there any fees or any ongoing expenses that will now be reduced because you have soft
Because of
code?
this.
Okay, yes, and we took those out, and that money was spread to increase in, office supplies, training budget, and everything else that we have. And
Okay.
so this here is just to increase the budget on its own to cover the yearly maintenance costs for our future.
So, okay, Dina, was this not included last year when we did the C ask?
The C ask included implementation, and then, we spoke of what
Okay, so it's just not in there already?
No,
Okay.
it wouldn't have been because the first year usually in implementation, you don't have a maintenance cost.
Right.
So, again, this is the one section that we did cut our training for this year, and that was attributed to the fact that traditionally we do send our staff to the civil school. However, that is on a rotational basis, usually amongst the three major areas of the state, the Pocatello, Boise area, and us. And so we're anticipating that that school will arrive to us here next year, and we'll look for local and free training out of that as opposed to sending people and paying. So that's why we reduced that training to 0 this year. Again, we are looking for an overtime increase of 4,973. The 3-year average is 13,032 for that office. The increase would still put us 3,000 under that. And again, we anticipate hopefully even reducing that more as soft code gets up to speed. But we just implemented that in April. We're just now at the go live point, and we just don't know, with all the records and hundreds of files we still have to transfer over to soft code as well as take in the incoming processes. We don't know what that's going to look like down the road for us.
Okay.
All right, on to 911. 911 handled 43,297 911 calls last year, 201,772 total phone events. That's up 27,900 from the previous year and 57,000 over the last 2. And again, these call increases, they take time for us to evaluate the needs of the parties on the phone, process the information, and again, that just puts additional stresses on our resources that we have down there to keep up with the trends that we're seeing. Again, we have to keep in mind that our staffing needs for some of these areas are different at 911 than some of the other areas we have. When we have 14 emergency response agencies that require our minimum staffing levels down there. When we have sick events and vacation needs that we are owed to our employees, we don't have the luxury of pushing off workload to the next day or siphoning it out to other sections or holding it and pending it till that person returns. We have to man these stations. And so, with that, that's why some of our overtime is more than others, and that's why we request some of that. Again, we've adopted our 2%. Our increase request is 1,079 beyond that 2%. That is solely based on onboarding costs for the vacant ECO positions that we have. The rest of the budget was flat. The rest of that 2% was smeared over to, again, our training and seminars line item. I think you can get a theme on this. We're really trying to ensure that we encapsulate our people and give them the foundations that they need. We did promote one supervisor position as of last Sunday. We have another one that we're anticipating promoting here in the next month. So we're just, again, continued leadership training for them to set them up for success for the efficient and effective shifts that they need to run. We do have mandated training, 40 hours for all employees over a 2-year period that we have to keep up with. Some of that can be local and some of it can be computerized, but there's still sometimes fees for some of those programs. It's imperative to keep investing in our, in development of these employees and keep up with those dispatching trends. One final thing on the training section is, again, onboarding of new employees, we're mandated and we need to get them training and certifications in the 3 disciplines that they do for call taking for our law, fire, medical. Those are absolute and necessary no matter what we do, so we can't get around those. Again, we do have overtime request for this section. This is the one section where I did decrease the overtime request. Previous year's budget was $90,000. Our 3-year trend reflects $164,722. I may have bitten off a little more than I can chew on this, and I'm hoping it doesn't come back to bite us a little bit, because I went for $73,989. I predicated that on our staffing. It's a pretty lofty goal, but if we can get our staffing at the numbers that we need to be, I anticipate that overtime and that on-call stuff should be coming down. That's the whole point of that, correct?
So your 73,000, that's above what you asked for last year?
No, that's the solid number that I said, this is the number we're asking for. Now, if you're so inclined to go back to the previous year's budget and match that same 90, bless you.
Right, okay.
So basically, what you're saying is you're reducing your
It would
OT
be-
request by almost $17,000.
Yes, sir. We do have our on-call request up there, and again, the only figure we could come up with at the time that was solid was our figure from 2019, which was 19,176. Again, get our staffing levels up to where we need to be, and we get those people solidified in their positions, and we'll be able to start bringing that back down because we'll have sufficient staff to cover those sick events that pop up and some of those items. We still will need to have some of that available because we still will have vacations that we need to honor that will put us back at minimums, and then when events pop up, we have to be able to have somebody ready to go to come in immediately. We don't have time to try to do a phone tree and search out for available people. We have to have that set up in place so they can respond.
Dean, a question for you. Breaking it out like this, I appreciate that, showing that it's a decrease, but is this shown as an increase in our budget? Is this part of the 6.5 million?
Yes.
Because,
So all the overtime asks from last year rolled back. So every
Okay.
year, there is a base overtime that's been in the system for
Right.
a while, and then each year, as departments feel they need some extra overtime, they will ask for an increase.
okay,
So this is an incremental increase. So last year's incremental increase rolled back.
okay,
So this is a restart of an increase, and yes, that is part of your personnel increase in the preliminary summary.
okay.
So what they're saying, so what you're saying in essence is that the almost $74,000 is an increase, but the increase is less than we increased it last year at 90,000, but it's still an increase.
Yes.
Okay, it's just a lower rate of increase. Okay, fair enough.
Let's talk a little bit about where we're at currently in our staffing that I've kind of outlined of where we're wanting to get to. We currently have that one supervisor and three ECO vacancies, but again, we're looking to fill that supervisor position here shortly. That would leave us for 4 ECO positions that would be open. We have 6 in the backgrounds that are eligible to start pushing through to get these filled, and I anticipate trying to do that by the end of June. Here's an additional ask that we have for this year. We have 3 frozen positions that have been frozen for quite some time. We would ask the commissioners to unfreeze those for this year. We're looking for 1 supervisor position and the 2 ECO positions. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat on that. One of those ECO positions is mistitled. It's titled as a senior communications officer. We no longer have that position, so we've reached out to HR, and if approved, to thaw these, we would basically just retitle that and bring it back down to the ECO position. Again, this is to get us at staffing levels to reduce our overtime and on-call use. This is also the push for a future outlook for our supervisors. We have to start working and getting them off of the terminals that they're mandated to be on right now so they can supervise, they can more better train, they can more better identify needs of the center, they can jump in on priority calls and listen and observe. And again, that's just a lot of the abilities that normal supervisors around us have that these guys aren't afforded at this time. So that's one of the directions that we're trying to trend towards by these positions. Our future outlook, this was something the undersheriff wanted us to let you know what we would ask for if we weren't at some of the restrictions. We would be asking for an additional 2. So I will be looking to come back in the following years for those. And again, that's just part of the plan. It takes 4 bodies for our current shifts to staff 24 hours a day for 7 days a week. So the unthawing of 2 this year, and then the additional 2 would give that 1 extra person straight across the board for 24-hour coverage. And again, that just helps us get those supervisors away from the terminals where they can truly supervise.
How many times have you guys been fully staffed? Is it-
Not since I have been there. I don't believe it's over 5 years before we.
It's rare that we're fully staffed in there, and for that matter, anywhere else. We have when you visited at the sheriff's office, you saw that big board of people. In my 25 years here, I've probably seen that board full once. You can hear that.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, staffing, we always have openings, and it's just a matter of how many. I think that's germane to any organization, it's just a matter of degree.
Sure.
So
However, I do want to note, we've made tons of strides on that over this past year. We hired 6. We've gotten 3 through the program. We have 2 others that are currently in the program. I think the last time that We've had somebody that was 2016, if I remember the board and the dates that they were hired that completed the program. So it's been a task, but I think that we've been pushing really hard to get those where we need to be.
What constitutes full staffing? How many people?
It would be currently 25 ECO positions, 6 supervisor positions, an ops manager, and the director.
Okay, and where are we today?
We have 4 vacancies at this time. One of those is technically labeled right now as a supervisor position, but we are ready to fill that.
And then 3 ECO?
And then 3 ECOs, so technically 4. And we do have, again, like I noted, we have 6 in backgrounds that we received from this last list.
Okay, so the 25 ECOs are sufficient to, man the terminals and provide the service 24/7?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, with a caveat, I mean, anytime we start, again, we start getting into vacations and, sick events and stuff, then no, it becomes, that's why our overtime is so high, because we have mandated overtimes just to keep up with those demands.
But is the overtime occurring because we're understaffed, is what I'm asking? If you had the full complement of 25, would you still be getting into OT?
Only on those rare occasions when we have to honor some vacation time and somebody calls in sick and we have a double hit to that shift.
Okay. So overall, though, it's a reduction?
Yes.
Okay. Fair enough.
And again, the additionals from the frozen ones are just, well, one, those were part of the center years ago, and it's just about trying to get those back in play and get those supervisors in a position where we can do more from them and with them.
Okay. Captain Street, you had a comment?
Just wanted to double check something with Captain Smart. Are the 3 frozen positions inclusive of that 25 ECOs and supervisors, or is that in addition to that number?
They are not included in the current 25 that we discuss and talk about.
Okay, so they are in addition.
They would be additional, so that would put us at 27 and 1 extra supervisor, so 7 supervisors.
Understood. Bill, Leslie, you okay? Go on. Thanks.
All right, and final, the 911 enhanced. This is the section that talks in acronyms of SWUI and the flux capacitors and stuff, so I do have Colin in case we get too deep where we need him to bail us out. Again, so we are asking in the 911 enhanced B budget increase for $33,864. This is predicated on our new 911 phone system that we implemented this last year, where we put in additional redundancy measures, which doubled our equipment. Hence, that line item for computer hardware maintenance has doubled to ensure that those systems can remain functional. Other than that, the rest of the B budget for the enhanced was actually reduced by $12,500. That's the implementation for the computer hardware maintenance line item was $46,411. And so obviously we did reduce other areas slightly to help offset that, and that's why we only have a $33,000 increase overall.
Okay.
We are looking for some capital requests this year. We have 9 consulate replacements that we're looking to do. We have 18 total in the center that are end of life. They can't be supported anymore for maintenance, and so we were looking to do half of those this year at a total of $72,000 for the 9 of those. We would then take those 9 consulates that we replace and use those for spare parts if anything happened to the remaining 9 that are at end of life. And then for our future, we would come back and slowly start to trickle in further on the replacement of the 9 consulates that are still considered outdated. We are looking to update a radio encryption key reader for $5,785. The current models we have are no longer functioning with our interface. They're freezing, they're not properly charging, the batteries don't hold a charge, so we're looking to get one, a new one for this year to help us keep going for our encryption process for our radios. And then the last part there would be our backup planning. This is to upgrade the microwave link between the center and the Canfield towers. And this was brought upon primarily with the cutting of the fiber optic cable at the 95 and Cherry Street about last year. And that caused a lot of havoc with some of the phone systems. And so this would be allowing us to start building in redundancy and backups so that if something like that occurred again around the county, we would have less interruptions for our services.
And how many interruptions have you had in the last 3 years, or how many do you have per year?
Colin?
How many service interruptions?
On that scale, that was the first one in 10 years. But of course, a major one. Minor interruptions where we lose other services because of other things. I would estimate 1 to 2 times a week per year.
How do you handle those? How do you back those up?
Depends on the system. This would be for almost all being county network primarily, is that's what we'll lose here and there. Like the consolettes, that's our backup for our radio. That's what we fall to when we lose connection. That's why we want to critically replace those as they fail. There's typically a backup. However, in the instance of the fiber cut, we don't have a backup to the county network and to the 911 center. It all flows through that one path. So that's what real redundancy we're trying to build with that.
So a lot of these capital asks, are they going to be obsolete when the next generation of 911 comes out?
No. No, they're especially the microwave will be with everything's native Ethernet, native IP. It's the standard, and anything progression forward will be along with that standard. We definitely try to not implement anything that's going to be obsolete within the next 5 years.
Sure. And then is that restricted funds?
Yes.
Okay. And then the consolettes restricted funds as well?
Those are all restricted funds.
And then do you know how much the next generation 911 will come from general fund? I mean, is there a percentage that some from restricted, some from general fund?
There should be 0 from the general fund, as long as there's whatever project or plan we have implemented, our fund covers that balance. Of course, if we go over what we have, we would have to cover the general funds. But that is the sole purpose of the E911 fund, is to cover E911, next generation 911 phone systems and infrastructure.
Okay, and the phone systems we just got last year, right?
They're currently being installed, right?
Okay.
This week, yes.
Right, and then that will be compatible with next gen?
Yes,
Okay.
it is fully next-gen I3 compliant. For
Okay.
once we rely on our carrier has to be able to deliver us next-gen 911 to the building, which they're not quite ready yet. But yes, it is fully compliant to handle that as soon as we want that service.
Okay, Bill, any questions? Yeah, Colin, quick question for you. Between the data and the voice, if we have a major incident, God forbid, but multiple fatalities or whatever, is the system currently capable of handling a surge in phone calls?
Depending on how large of a surge, if we're talking 911 calls.
Yes.
We have 18 911 trunks. As soon as we reach that limit, there is the flow to, it will start, it'll go to Bonner County, it will go to Post Falls, it will roll to another
So it'll
trunk.
transfer?
They should hopefully never hit a busy, now assuming that their lines aren't busy. There are also things in place where it'll roll to a 10-digit number and call the admin line. We can take 50 admin line calls out in at one time. Again, with staffing of 6 people, you might not be able to answer all 50, but that is the capability of the system. And it's a very scalable system, so if we find that that is too small, we can very easily scale the system up.
During your tenure here, have we ever fully loaded the 18 trunks and had to transfer?
As far as I know, there is only one time that we have had all trunks busy, and that was on 4th of July. Last year.
Last year, okay, understandable.
For the shooting?
Right, for the,
Was
okay, yeah.
911 trunks were full, and that was a very split second, hang up the call, now a
Understood, okay.
And I don't believe we had to transfer a number because of the call from that, but that was the last.
Because they were short duration. Okay, great, thank you, appreciate it. Okay, Captain Smart.
That concludes the sections that I have, unless you have any further questions.
Leslie, Bill? No, sir, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So who's up next? Captain John Holacek, good morning.
Morning, Commissioners. Yeah, a minute to get our slideshow going.
Okay, while you're doing that, did you want to break for the 10 minutes? Or did you want to go to 9:30? Do you want to stick to this?
We can, how long do you think you have? 30 minutes or?
I think we'll be no more than 30 minutes, possibly
Okay.
less.
I'm fine.
And then I'll end the
Okay.
talks.
Just don't ask a lot of questions, right?
He'll talk more than I will.
Okay, so we'll be doing jail and jail services and everything related thereto. Okay.
That's us.
Oh, I put it here, it's just. No, that's what I scanned.
Well, it should be on the.
Yeah.
There we go. You ready?
Ready whenever you are.
Oh, go right ahead.
All right, you can go ahead and, so this is the key here to,
Yeah, until the clicker arrives, yes. Okay.
go and move on. I just started out with this, a slide pulled off of the county website, I assume Nancy put together. Just showing a little bit of a historical history of the Kootenai County Jail. Back in 1987, was originally built for 98 inmates. As time went by, in 2001, we expanded. We went up to 325 inmates, and most recently, in 2018, we expanded to 451 inmates. And the top, you can see there, in 1987, it was 0.15% of our population that was matched, correlated with the number of beds we have. In 2000, we went to 0.29% of the population, and as of 2018, we were 0.28%. So we've stayed fairly consistent over the last 20 years with what those percentages are. Start out with a quote. All of the real heroes are not storybook combat fighters either. Every single man in Army plays a vital role. Don't ever let up. Don't ever think your job is unimportant. Every man has a job to do, and he must do it. Every man is a vital link in the great chain. That's a quote from George Patton, so thanks for listening. Our mission this year for our budget was try to keep our B budget as minimal as we could. We had a 2% goal to try to stay under. As you'll see, we stayed well within that. And then to present the mandatory capital and personal expenses and try to leave as much money from our B budget available to supplement those. So our B budget last year, our FY20 B budget base was $3,544,349. This year's request for our B budget is $3,548,099. So it's only an increase of $3,750. So that's approximately 1/10%. This includes the medical contract and the food contract, both which went up by CPI increases. We had no choice over that, so we trimmed it as much as we possibly could to leave $67,139 we left on the table from what your ask was. So we kept it as thin as we possibly could.
We appreciate that. Thank
Any,
you.
on the jail overcrowding, last year, I believe we started at approximately 125,000. As you recall, back before the expansion, we were spending a couple $1 million a year. Predicting what our population is going to do is nearly impossible. This year, we haven't touched it. So far, we've been right where we need to be. We got as high as 417 inmates right before the COVID-19 started. Once we get above 430, we have to ship inmates out of county. We've been as high as 499 inmates. So this is one that I left flat. I left it at 51, 125, but I have no way to predict what my population's going to do. I have no control.
Where are we
over
at today?
that. 280, I believe, right now. Lowest we've been.
So when we
since-
get up close to 500, is that because we're holding for the state?
No.
not?
That's partially. As inmates get arrested in Kootenai County, of course, they go through the judicial process, and then once they get sentenced to state, they become a state inmate. They're generally here within a week, 2 weeks to pick them up. We pressure them. They're here, like I said, every 2 weeks they'll take a load of them. So throughout the course of 2 weeks, we may have as many as 40 or 50 of those inmates, but then they'll pick them up. So it's not a huge percentage of the.
How would you explain the wide fluctuation, like from 280 to 499? I mean,
A big part of it was the courts worked with us. They pushed back sentence dates. The courts have been essentially shut down, so a lot of folks that
Okay.
had crimes, that they had pending criminal matters, that's been pushed back. Some of the lower level crimes got pushed back to come back at a later date to serve their time. A lot of people have been self-isolating. Arrests have been way down. So this was kind of a work between the courts and people just not committing as many crimes and us trying to get down where we could isolate a little bit. We've got, try to keep 450 inmates 6 feet apart would be impossible. Being in that 280 range, it makes it a little bit easier to do.
Sure.
But it is climbing now as things are starting to warm up.
As we
and
open
back
up, okay.
And once
So-
the forts open back up, I anticipate we'll be full again pretty quick.
So for the benefit of anybody listening in or viewing, the jail is essentially pre-sentencing, is that correct?
We have sentenced inmates as well, mostly misdemeanors. Some felonies will end up getting sentenced to serve their time there, but the majority of our population are people moving through the judicial process.
Okay.
Is that a year? People have been sentenced to a year or less?
For the most part, we've had people sentenced to a year on one misdemeanor, consecutive to another year on another misdemeanor. That's pretty rare. Some people can take as many as 2 years to go through the judicial process.
But that's rare.
Yeah, most people, our average stay is somewhere around 7 days, I believe.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, keep going.
So yes, that 51,125, that's something that I guess you as commissioners need to contemplate whether we want to stay there. I left it flat there. I know we negotiated down that last year, and it's worked for us this year, but I don't know what's going to come. There's a potential for underfunding if our population does increase. Like I said,
So what's the actual number as of today?
I believe we're about 280 today.
No, of that amount.
We still have all of it left. We had no expenses out of there this year. We've been able to house all of our inmates in-house this year since the expansion. Oh, wait, I have a clicker now, I guess.
It's on.
Is it?
It's on and it's live. It may not be talking to its friend over here.
Here we go.
Use the,
All right. See budget, I'll
Did you have
turn over
any
to.
questions on the B budget before we move on to the C capital request or anything?
Leslie, Bill? Carry on.
Okay. Our first C budget request is a classification system upgrade. I'd like to run a video. It's about 11 minutes long. It is the video from the founder of the North Point system, which is our jail classification system that we use. It's mostly for education purposes, so you understand the importance of why we're asking for this upgrade. So, Dina, can you get on that link there?
it's coming up.
Can I ask you a question in the meantime? Is there any juvenile component to it? Because I know juvenile detention is needing.
They're needing to upgrade.
Difficulties, hang on.
Okay.
It's not a shared system that I'm.
It's not a shared system.
Not a shared system, but do you know if there's a component to it that would?
I imagine there is, yeah.
Okay.
I think where Commissioner Duncan is going is that juvenile detention desperately needs an upgrade, and we're wondering if we can sort of kill two birds with one stone here.
Our quote wasn't for that, but I can certainly go back to the table and find out for them to see if they can makes sense. We did that with driver's
Be
license,
nice.
QS,
Yeah.
some of those things last year.
Okay.
If you're a hospital and you've got people coming in the front door of the hospital, you've got to say,
I can see the video, but it's not coming up on the screen. Just need a sec here.
Why don't you describe it in essence while Dina's trying to see if she can get it up?
The classification system is really it's the brains of the jail. When people are admitted into the jail, I use that term, as you'll see in the video as well, it's just like going to a hospital. People end up with different conditions, and they need to be isolated into different sections of the jail. And a lot of those are based on crimes that they've committed currently, crimes they committed in the past. They could have mental health conditions. A lot of different areas that we have to use. And this system makes it really easy. It's just a plug-and-play system. You ask questions. There's surveys that are given to them, and we use historical data that we have on these inmates, both from our facility and facilities across the country. And what it does is it segregates them into the jail. You've all been on tours there, and you see the different uniforms. Those represent their classification levels. And we have a duty to do that, not just because it's what we want to do.
It's a federal mandate.
It is. It's mandated by Idaho jail standards as well. And, our insurance for the county also relies on our compliance with the mandated statutes that are in there. So, got it?
Maybe. Hang on.
We have had the current system since 2000, and it has reached end of life. It is no longer supported with the Windows platform that we operate on. Those keep moving up, and we've gotten our money's worth out of it. Our current ask for that is it's about a $29,000 ask for the upgrade, and then there's a roughly $5,000 in licensing and maintenance fees that occur annually. This would be the first year, and then we would ask for that in the future budgets as well on a line item.
Question, does this tap into a broader database in the cloud somewhere, or is it strictly our facility?
It's input. We have it goes back to a lot of our, the 90s and 2000 when we implemented the system. That information was imported in there.
Okay.
We run criminal histories, and we get all that information from other facilities as well.
All right.
Sorry.
Thanks for your patience.
Yeah.
you've got to have the ward for cancer, the ward for mental health, the ward for whatever it is, broken legs. And so,
Can we raise
because
volume?
each of the categories requires quite different treatment. And it turns out it's the same thing
There you go,
in
okay.
jails and prisons. There's dozens and dozens
Thank
of
you.
decisions have to be made by the floor officers, and sometimes the medical staff. So classification does all that. Rule-based procedures are wired into the policies. Every jail has to have a policy procedure manual, and a lot of these are if-then rules. If he's like this, you do that. And the staff learn all these rules, that becomes their job. Decision trees had been around since the 30s and 40s, but none of them had been specifically developed with coordinating jails in mind. So this particular classification system would separate the chronic criminals from the first-timers and, the very lightweight ones. It also separated violence from nonviolent, and it also separated those who would be good candidates to go back to their community through early release or something like that, and identify the guys who really did need high levels of security. So it was tailor-made for jails. And I don't really recall another one, a decision tree on the market at the time that was like that. The classification tree that we use in jails actually enables the jail to somehow or other control its population size by identifying groups that could be, by policy, given alternative release, early release, etc. One of the things classification does, it puts guys on minimum security. Minimum security guys often have access to the community. They can go to a class somewhere. It IDs the real bad guys and puts them up into much higher security. And so everyone, even judge, can see the direct link to public safety. And yet public safety is maybe the number one or two policy goal of all these organizations. So we start there. If you don't separate, the wolves from the sheep, you're going to have the wolves eating the sheep. And in jails and prisons, particularly, the smart manipulative psychopaths, they're going to run with this thing and exploit everyone in the jail if they can get away with it. Okay, now one of the things staff want greatly when you're working in a jail or prison, you do not want surprises. And so one of the ways to avoid having surprises is to know who you've got. And classification is the decision-making procedure that, maximum, medium, minimum. So having the right security level was absolutely critical, job number one. Case law specifies the particular criteria that these technologies must have. So I went to the case law and started studying all the cases against jails and prisons and probation departments and so forth. So what I started finding is that if you're going to introduce a system like that, it's going to be reliable. So those things are very much present as operating criteria. Another huge thing in the case law is that you cannot use a system that's never been validated. We've got to know, does it give the right answers, or is it some level accurate, more accurate than what we had before? So that takes us into all the validation studies we do with Compass, because we make sure that it is valid. Now you're crossing the T's and you're dotting the I's because there's this set of criteria that are practical criteria that jails and prisons must have. Now, what does classification do? It does risk assessment. It also does needs assessment. The foundation of treatment is knowing what the right set of needs are and which are the needs that you've got to take care of. So that's the right to appropriate treatment as another constitutional right. Another big one is that a classification system must be racially neutral. It can't be biased in favor of white guys, or it can't be biased in favor of Protestants. You have to eliminate all racial language from the questions in your classification system.
This whole issue of bias, however, is probably like one of the major issues that justice is grappling with, right? Because it permeates.
Yeah. Well, it does permeate the system. Here's the paradox. Risk assessment models, as we've shown, are not biased. An important theme in all of this work is to understand the big picture with the users and the decisions that they're faced with. And it turns out that the people who study decision making have articulated three kind of basic tasks that are sequential in nature. So that first phase, I call it the data collection process. Some people in the legal profession call it the discovery process. But discovery is all about getting at the relevant factors. And obviously there can be many mistakes made at that stage. A big mistake is gathering irrelevant factors, thereby, clouding up everything and having so many distractions. So relevancy is a big one. Accuracy is another. The important theme is to do that job properly, quickly, accurately, and relevant. The second big phase is sometimes called the interpretation phase, sometimes called the case formulation. Now, what that's going to do with is connecting the dots. You go away from gathering the data, but you end up in the second stage of putting it together, synthesizing the data. Another phrase that they use is called sense making. Can you make sense of this data? Or are you still bewildered when you look at this? And are you suffering from cognitive overload, in which it's just too much and you can't deal with it, and you can't connect the dots? And what that means is that you still don't understand your case. So the understanding of the case is something that should precede taking action. And there's many instances where people take action before they understand the case. So that second phase of a case formulation is absolutely critical. If you can get those two phases done, discovery and deliberation, where you put all together, your next phase is to take action. And that obviously is you're connecting your assessment and your sense making to action. And I'm afraid to say it that this is one of the major disconnects in criminal justice, that the action stage is often quite disconnected from the discovery and the case formulation phase. There's a lot of reasons for this. One of the big reasons is that the outcome data is often not collected. So if the outcome data is not collected, that means that the decision maker who's at phase 2, if he's done his case formulation stuff well, it means he doesn't know what to do in the third action phase because the data is not available to tell him what works best with what particular prisoner. So evaluation research is needed to complete the linkage, the connectedness between these three phases. And at Compass, we've tried to do the best we could. For all three phases, we've got a lot of theoretical stuff in the Compass that other instruments don't have, because one of the ways in which you understand things is through theory. Theory is an explanation. So why not be aware of the major theoretical explanations of crime? This is a professional gap that Compass is trying to fill by introducing directly into its assessment stage the major theories that can then be put together in a good common sense way in the second stage, the case formulation stage. Aside from building on theoretical factors, we also introduced quality of data tests. So we've introduced a lie test and an incoherence test. The lie test is a very short test of about 7 or 8 questions, and it'll nail the guy who's trying to look good. So if someone's faking good, then the lie test fixes that. If someone's coming in and screwing around with the questionnaires, yes, here, no, giving it no thought whatsoever, you're going to get all kind of questions that don't relate to each other. We've done a lot of validation work, long-term. It's called prospective validation, where you do your tests, you give a 2 or 3 year at risk, where the person's on the street, and then you find out what's happened at the end of that time at risk. And then you correlate your risk assessment score against what actually happens. That's kind of the best way to get a real validation. You look at what actually happened. So that means you've got to be able to get the outcomes. I mean, the purposes of risk assessment is somewhat different from the purposes of needs assessment. A good system is going to be validated, objective in some way. Does it provide a rational, coherent story for your decisions? So in other words, does the classification itself provide to the jail a good, solid, coherent rationale for all of the decisions it has to make on a daily basis? It's not every day that you get an instrument introduced at one level of an organization and they like it sufficiently to keep it for 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, 10 years. So you've got California, New York, and Michigan all out there 10 years down the line. Not only are they still using it, but they've expanded its use.
Is that it? Thank you.
Thank you for
Informative.
your patience with the video.
Okay.
I felt it was justified because it's a big ask. It's not a small amount to upgrade software for that. But you can see the importance of it within the criminal justice system. It's not just for the jail. That information gets shared with our prosecutors. Our phone systems are the same way, our surveillance systems. They all go through classification office software system.
Well, we're on time this week. Welcome to this third lecture in the Darwin College lecture series on risk.
She's trying to get rid of it.
I think the next slide after that, as we've already talked about it, was the actual budget asked. And it's up there on the screen now, the $29,309 for the upgrade and then the $5,250 for the licensing and maintenance fees.
Are there any agencies that you know of that are using this? Any other?
We're currently using the North Point system, and we need to upgrade to the newest version. This is a 20-year-old version that we're using.
Oh, okay, so it's the
like
same company?
Yeah, we're operating on Windows, it's like Windows 3.1 when you've got Windows 10 out now.
Okay,
The equivalent of it. But it is not serviceable. Our maintenance fees that we've had been paying will not cover any more service of this product that we currently utilize.
sure. Do you feel that the upgrade will be a time savings?
Absolutely.
Okay. And what is IT's involvement?
None, other than we've been utilizing this software, like I said, for the last 20 years.
So it's really low intensive on IT?
Nothing for them.
Okay.
So what's the essence of the upgrade? What is it that you're adding through the upgrade? What capability that we don't have today?
Boy, I guess it's just the same thing when you upgrade your Windows system, better performance, and it won't work with the Windows platform that we have either, because this was
Well,
produced 20 years ago.
It looked like answering the questions was really outlined nicely.
Yes,
And how long do you think the upgrade will be good for?
hopefully another 20 years.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I don't know, as technology changes and crime changes, I mean, we don't know those things. And like he prefaced at the end of this, agencies across the country are using this type of system, and North Point's been a front runner in that.
Okay.
And the 5250 is a recurring charge annual?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
got it.
And that may change with, I can't imagine it's gonna go much.
Okay.
Slide.
Anything else?
I've got the second capital request, and this is a much shorter video, and this relates to our jail surveillance.
Okay.
I like videos. Can't.
There's a commercial here, so I will spare you the commercial.
Can be for the simplest decision, whether it's deciding what would I like to have for dinner this evening, or if I go to a restaurant, what adjustable mattress sets. Menu. Plus, even if you've been there before, you don't know, maybe the chef is off today, maybe something bad's going to happen, maybe the chef has an norovirus, so you don't know what's going to happen.
Okay, let's try again here.
That was it, the one you just had up there.
Next time we need to practice.
Inmate busted on video trying to...
You're there.
smuggle this shank. It's just one of the ways that new surveillance cameras are paying off in the troubled Santa Clara County Jail. KPIX5's Len Ramirez is live at the jail with the evidence of other crimes caught on camera. Len?
Well, Ken, we were just inside the jail, and there are cameras everywhere. There's only two spots where they can't have cameras, and that's in individual jail cells, and the other spot is in the showers. But practically everywhere else, 24/7, the cameras are rolling. From the main pods where the inmates spend their days to the sport courts where they exercise, all angles at Santa Clara County's main jail are now covered by cameras.
We firmly believe that these cameras so far are worth their weight in gold, if not more.
Since installing 270 new cameras over the last 4 months, the assistant sheriff says they've helped solve an inmate assault case by identifying suspects and helped clear a correctional deputy falsely accused of brutality. They were also used to help discover an inmate's makeshift knife known as a shank. Cameras captured it being passed by an inmate under a cell door.
But they're there, they're working, they're recording everything.
The death of inmate Michael Tyree last August, allegedly at the hands of 3 correctional deputies, exposed gaps in the old surveillance system. Frustrated, Sheriff Lori Smith used her own credit card to buy an off-the-shelf system from Costco, and a week later it paid off, capturing an inmate gang fight. Increasing surveillance of inmates and deputies is one of the reforms ordered by a Blue Ribbon Commission. Deputies say the new cameras have not changed inmate behavior, but may be changing how the correctional staff works for the better.
These cameras are just an additional layer of transparency to show the community that we're not afraid to videotape our deputies as they work.
The new system cost the county $20,000, but it's considered an interim system. A more robust system is what the county really wants, something with better storage and faster playback, but the price tag on that is about $12 million. Reporting live in San Jose, Len Ramirez, KPIX5.
Okay.
I'm glad he threw that price tag on the end there, 'cause ours is quite a bit lower than that.
Yeah, you're looking good.
Yeah,
Like a bargain. Okay, go ahead.
as you know, we've had our system since 2011. It was a big ask at the time. I think you were part of that. It was about 500,000, 750,000 for the entire jail at the time. We've expanded that since then. And you can see on the slide there, we did budget for this, or it was asked to be part of the last expansion that we had in 2018. They did tie in some of the new Pelco cameras with the old Enduro operating system, but it did save project costs at the end of the jail expansion. We did not upgrade the system at that time. We didn't realize how far into life it was, and we just got notified of that this year, that in spring of next year they will no longer support the old system, which really covers about 2/3 of the jail. So that's again, it's an end-of-life issue. You know, as far as risk management and mitigation of liabilities within the jail, it's been a lifesaver for us. It cuts report times down. It's like the assistant chief was saying on the video, the transparency's there. It causes officers to be better. And we are indirect supervision. You've all been there as well. You've seen the deputies walking around in and out of the housing units. They're not directly there all day long in those housing units. So they're in and out, and inmates know when the deputy's out, the surveillance is there, and that's how we pick up most of the mischief that happens. Fights happen, they do them in the weirdest places, but the cameras pick up who's going in there and who's coming out. So we can always go back and follow up on those with crime reports and prosecution and restitution sometimes as well.
So is this just a software upgrade, no hardware?
It's both.
Both,
Hardware
okay.
and software.
Hardware and software. Okay.
We did meet with, earlier in the year, we met with 2 contractors that are regional contractors, and we received a huge difference in price quote. We've worked with both of these vendors in the past. One was from $55,000 to $100,000, and the other one was close to $500,000. And the scope of their projects were completely different too. One suggested full replacement of everything, but we know we don't need to do that. So hope to get the money to put out an RFQ and then go present it and see what they come back with. But we can't put that out there until we have money allocated for that.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
No. Sean?
I just have a quick question, Andy. Are you planning on having somebody engineer that?
Yes.
Okay. That's what we did with the expansion.
Right.
That way you guys get that full corner coverage.
And then the ongoing cost, it's in the last part of that, there would be a 5-year phase replacement of the cameras as well. There's 2/3 of the jail has older cameras that are reaching end of life, and it would be a $10,000 to $15,000 ask per year going forward for the actual camera itself replacement. There's several of those throughout the jail.
Okay.
Commissioner, just one quick reminder.
Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
In dedicated fund balance, I believe you set aside $400,000 for this project. Just I wanted to remind you that that was there, and it was supposed to be shared with JDC. So the $100,000 ask here is, I guess, I'm just going to put that in the context of the $400,000 that we already set aside.
Okay. And that goes back to the, as you mentioned, and as I mentioned before, being able to potentially address maybe part of the JDC need as well. Okay. Go on.
Captain Holichek.
Our adopted budget for FY20 for overtime was $215,000. That's what it's been pretty much every year for the last quite a few years. Last year, I put in the request for the 3-year average of what our actual overtime expense was. Near the end of the budget process, we discussed and negotiated. The amended budget came in at $340,000. Started out this year again at the base budget, or the adopted budget, at $215,000. So what I presented, what I put in for was a 3-year average of $723,000, well, $723,028, which is just about exactly what the 3-year average is. Currently, of the $340,000 we had budgeted for this year, we're 109% spent. And go to the next slide if you would, and I'm sure the question that comes up is why so much overtime? The overtime's caused by a lack of staffing. The picture of where we are with our staffing today, we have 3 detention deputy vacancies, which we're getting close. We weren't anywhere near that a couple months ago. But of those, 9 are currently in training because they're all new hires. So with the 9 in training, that means we have a deputy that's with them, training them, so they're not necessarily part of the staffing. Well, 2 bodies equals 1 for the most part is where we end up. We're down 6 control room operators. We're down 3 booking clerk vacancies, which puts us a total of 21 positions that we're having to backfill with overtime right now. Salary savings currently is saving us. If we look right now, like I said, we're 109% spent on our overtime. But if you look at the overall A budget at 64% of the way through the year as of Monday, we're 54% spent in our total A budget. So that's the question we have to answer, is the salary savings from the vacant positions going to cover the overage? So we could underfund it, or do we put the full 3-year average? I just thought it was best to be transparent and present what the 3-year average is, and that's what I put in for.
Okay.
But just to kind of explain how the overtime comes up is we have minimum post requirements. This is a picture of one of our 50-man pods. Over in this section that's dormitory style, we've decided that it's 3 deputies to safely take care of those 200 inmates. I don't think it's excessive, but if we have a day where someone calls in sick, or we have someone at training, or we just have less than sufficient staffing, we're having to pay someone to come in at time and a half to cover those posts. So all of the overtime that we get is just to maintain the minimum safe staffing numbers. Of course, we get everybody fully up and trained, and we have everyone in the positions. We have enough positions to cover sick leave and vacations and training, so the overtime would go down. Just like we did last year, I guess we need to decide and figure out what the best number to come up with there is. We know the 3-year average, but we do also know that there's a potential for the salary savings to cover it. And as the salary savings goes down, of course, the overtime number is going to go down.
Right. So help me understand. So 625,000. So that's all that would be in that line item? It's not on top of anything else?
625 is what we have loaded. That was the request that we received. So your average, it looks like you may have adjusted your average to a number, and we loaded that number. So that is in addition to the 250.
Okay, yeah, the number I presented, I believe it was loaded, at least that was my intent. 723 total, I believe, was a loaded number. Is that correct, Tammy?
We can take that offline.
So anyway, yeah, the 723 would be counting the, well, whether you call it the 215 base or the 340 base, so My intent was 723 minus whichever base you chose to use.
Okay, so it'll be total of 723.
Correct.
In
That was
that
my,
line
that was
item.
my intent. It was my understanding that was loaded.
We'll adjust that.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough.
Any more questions on the overtime? All right. Future needs, we did not budget for this, but I don't think it would be right to leave this off of here. In 2018, we did the expansion. We have 108 beds that are just shells right now that we could expand and increase our population ability to 559 beds. Our peak population, since I've been there, was in 2018. We were up to 499 inmates. And just with our current 452 beds we have right now, to be able to have just the slightest bit of room to move people around and accept new prisoners coming in, at 499, we'd have roughly 70 inmates that we'd have to house out of county. I reached out to Yakima County, and right now they're about $70 a day. And just to put in perspective, if we did get up to 500 and stayed there for a year, we'd be looking at roughly $1.8 million in out-of-county housing that we'd have to spend. It's another one of those things I can't predict. It seems unlikely that we're not going to end up there at some point. And my thought process would be that to put the $5 to $6 million into completing those, even if we didn't staff it and house inmates there. But once we do get to that point where we have this number of inmates and we decide we are going to move on it, we're looking at a couple-year process to get the architects, the bids, and everything else we have to do, and we could bridge that gap quite a bit and save quite a bit of money a year. Like I said, it's partially based on unknown data because I don't know what's going to happen. We kind of set, like I said, we have 452 bunks. We set 430 as kind of the number that if we hit 430 inmates, we have to start shipping out of county. That only leaves us 32 empty bunks in our jail. Well, we have to classify inmates. We have to separate inmates based on crimes, enemies, whatever. We also have new arrests coming in. We can get as many on a Friday night. We can get 40, 50 arrests. So to be honest, the recommended capacity to run a jail at is 80%. That 430 is more like 93%. So we're pushing the envelope as far as we really can on that. Like I said, that was a really, really conservative number that me and the undersheriff came up with just to try to minimize our out-of-county housing. They said as of, I think, February, we were up to 417 inmates. So
But that was, I think you had like 40-something waiting to go to IDC.
Yeah, that was a surge.
Yeah, as a general rule, that's where they'll start out, they'll build up, and yeah, we can have as many as 40, and then they'll come pick them up. And that was kind of what was saving us from going over is they would come in and pick those up. So he said that's a number that'll build for 2 weeks until they come do their transport.
Okay. All right.
Additionally, just for transparency, and that $5 to $6 million, I believe that's what you were thinking. Is that correct, Sean?
Well, yeah, I was gonna ask the question, are you gonna have them as cells like first?
Why are we going here?
Or are you gonna do pods like this?
That'd be the cells like the first half. I believe the architecture was already there to complete them similar to what we have in the rest of it, the 2 to 4 man
Yeah,
cells.
that's
I
correct.
believe the design's already there.
Yeah, that's correct. I was just trying to make sure that that hadn't changed.
Guys, we are not going there.
So
This is
that's
not going to happen in the next year or two.
I know. I just had to ask the question.
Let me be unequivocal. This commissioner is not going for it. If you look at our population, if you look at the in-migration, and if you look at the demographics, it's over the age of 60. And if I go back to the initial segment of this initial portion of this segment, if I look at your percentage increase versus population, it's actually declining. Now, at some point, we may have to expand, but the bulk of our transplants are over the age of 60. They tend not to be the ones committing a crime. So at some point, we'll have to expand, but I really don't want to go down this road right now. Leslie, Bill, thoughts?
Agree.
Yeah, it's not in the budget. I think
Okay,
it's
yeah,
just
let's
an
stop this here.
informational.
This is not going to happen in the next year or two.
Yeah,
Sorry,
we didn't
folks.
put it in the budget, but yeah, I just,
Oh, no, I get it. I appreciate it.
from my
I
viewpoint, I
wanna
just
be
wanted to
unequivocal,
present to
that's all.
you what I see.
Yep.
So next, I'll let Captain Deke speak to this.
I-
Why it was a little discrepancy is because there was we went back, there was $215,000 that was pulled forward from FY19, so that was already moving forward into this budget. So what we asked for was $509,496 to put, to add to, that's a base amount. So really, the base amount that we're asking for would have been the 509. Loaded is going to be 625, 509. So unloaded, which is just in the regular A budget, is going to be combining would be the 724, 496.
Okay, understood.
What you guys have listed is correct. For the loaded wages, he's asked, that the jail is asking for would be the 625, 509. That's going to be the budget, burden rate. Make sense? You guys
Okay.
Last point. I wasn't here last year for the discussion when we went through the pay study that the county did. First off, we are grateful to the board, to HR, to the auditors for working with the sheriff's office for the pay study in 2019. As you all know, we did have some discussion after the pay study came out and the budget year got started. We feel that the detention comparison had arguable inclusions and exclusions. The inclusions were the corrections comparison, and then the exclusions were our market is really, we're losing people to patrol. We don't lose them to any other type of agency. We don't lose them to corrections facilities or other jails. And we know that, and we're thankful too for the board offering to revisit that discussion of the pay study. Doesn't mean that their money's going out, but to actually look at that pay study to make adjustments to substantiate what we feel we know on that. We understand the times right now. This is it's a very sensitive time with the COVID, and we don't know what the future revenues and income for the county will be, but we have an obligation to our jail staff to bring this issue up and ask about it.
And we have an obligation to all the employees, but understood.
I do want to defer to Captain Holacek on this last couple slides or last couple of points here, because he and Alicia Lynch did a regional pay comparison, which did show some things.
Yeah, I think I can't remember if I sent it to all of you or just Bill, but Bill asked me to take a look at the Pacific Northwest and just some comparisons between detention and patrol. And I'm going to be very brief on it, but bottom line is for agencies over 150,000 in the Pacific Northwest, the average spread between detention and patrol for sheriff's office with both jails and patrol was roughly 9% at the top, and our current separation is 19% for Kootenai County. And the average separation at the start of the pay scale was 8%, and we're at 14%. Just so for what it's worth, in Pacific Northwest, those numbers show that we do have a little bit wider separation, or quite a bit wider separation than what the standard is for our counterparts in the Pacific Northwest. Some of the results of that, we've lost 13 detention deputies over the past year, and currently there are 4 detention deputies on the patrol hiring list. You know, I know you can't attribute all of this to pay, but it certainly is part of the effect. So just appreciate you taking a look at that again. Appreciate you listening to us last year. You said you would look at it this year. So we didn't want to leave that out of this. So.
Okay.
Last quote, most of the important things in the world have been accomplished by people who have kept on trying when there seemed to be no hope at all. Dale Carnegie. We were pushed at the start of this process to pick through our budgets and look for every dime that we could save. We think we did an okay job on that with our B budget at least. There's a couple asks up there that are good. But we turn it back to you two. We know you have a hard job, but we're thankful for listening to our requests today. Any questions?
We're done.
Thank you.
Okay, time. Sure.
Association of Counties and Sheriff's Association, we were able to lobby to get the bill passed that requires us to retain
Understood. Okay, so it's 9:33. Let's take a break. Be back at 9:45. Thank you.
Anytime?
Okay, let me just, okay, so what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to ask everybody, and I realize we're asking questions, try to step it up. I want to try to avoid the afternoon session if possible and see if we can wrap up by noon, or maybe we go to 12:30 if we need to. You're all busy, we're busy, we have a hearing next Tuesday night. That's the first of its type under the COVID, and so we have to scramble to get all that put together, so I appreciate the cooperation. Captain Edmondson, take it away, please.
Shorten it up. You're going to love this presentation.
Thank you.
So I have the Investigations and Professional Standards Division, and what I wanted to do first is just give you a little bit of history about what that division is now, because it is different over the last couple of years. But right now we're going to be talking about two sections. The detectives org code is there for you, and that includes all of the criminal investigators, and professional standards and investigation support. And what that includes is background investigations, the training unit, crime analysis, evidence unit, registered sex offender registry. And, uh-oh, am I going to need my flipper? There we go. So the history is that the Professional Standards Division was formed in 2017 when Sheriff Wolfinger did some reorganization of the office. And what we did at that point was, because it was also mid-year in the budget, we started budgeting and adding what we thought we might use from, we would take that from the administrative org set for the sheriff's office. When we first got involved in budget planning for that particular division, we planned for what we would need for the division itself out of the admin org set. And so this year what we ended up doing is planning for and taking that money from the administrative org set where it had previously been for this budget year and put it into a new org set. So you're going to see that as we go on. But first we'll start.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Just for people who are watching, I know what it is, and we all know what it is, but what's an org set?
Oh, the organizational set, the assignment number for the budget code.
Within the budget code?
Within the budget code.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So we're going to start with detectives and just talk about the A budget. There are two specific asks for detectives for that particular section. And what you'll see is an on-call request for $8,736. That is a program that we started last year, so it's in this budget cycle, and it provides for us to be able to have an on-call program for our detectives. That's very essential for us because during that time that a detective is off duty for the period that we're requiring them to be available for on-call, they need to be within a certain area, a distance from their home or the office, and prepared to respond to anything we have. And at the point that they are called out to an event, then overtime kicks in and the on-call duty status pay ends. So that moves us over into the overtime. I would note on the on-call pay with that being loaded, it's a $10,726 request total. The overtime request is a $36,910 request over what our current base is, $15,862. And we're historically overspent in that line item. Our 3-year average is $52,772. So we'd like to be able to add the $36,910 in so that we could try to more accurately reflect what our actual usage is. The total impact for these two items with loaded wages is $56,077. B budget for detectives is pretty simple. The request is 0. So we used the 2% though, that increase, and we didn't apply it across all of the line items as it was initially designed. We took that 2% and applied it towards our training line items. And we did that because the training line item, the needs that we had last year and requested were cut by over $15,000. So we're trying to get back up to what our actual needs are for training. Based on the 3-year trend for the motor fuels and lubricants line item, we also reduced that by $3,466, and we applied that into the training line items as well. We anticipate being able to have a savings there, and the net effect was that it didn't move our B budget at all. This just gives you an idea of where those dollars went for the 2%. As we moved them into the training line items, we increased our 8301. We can go through those numbers if you'd like, but from per diem to housing and transportation, and the what am I thinking of? What's the next the line item for the training registration costs and everything. So the 8301, 02, 03, and 08 are the training line items that were affected through that transfer of the funds. And we're also trying to accomplish some succession planning because we anticipate with the retirements and some promotional opportunities that there will be movement in the detectives area as well. We do have a capital request, and that capital request is carried over from last year as well. It's a GPS mapping system, and if you'll recall, last year we talked about it being broken and outdated. We can't get it fixed. It's a very handy tool, and I'd like to have Detective Northrup come up here and talk about that capital request for us. We also have a 27-minute video. I'm sorry, it's just a 1-minute video. Time savings. So
that will allow.
Commissioner Duncan, Commissioner Filios, and Commissioner Brooks, thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you.
You bet.
As my captain said, I'm a detective assigned to the Detectives Division, currently assigned to the Major Crimes Division. I've been in that capacity, I've been a detective since '02, and a lateral transfer to the Sheriff's Office from 2000. And I've been a Major Crimes Detective since about, say, 2012. Previously, with the growth in Kootenai County and with the increase in the amount of crimes and the severity of crimes that we started experiencing in Kootenai County, it became necessary. We had more complex crimes. We had more of an expectation put on the Detective Division from the prosecuting attorney's office as far as the specificity and the abilities of us processing crime scenes. One of the programs that we looked at and started doing back in 2010 was the ability to measure our crime scenes. We started having crime scenes that were larger. We had a number of plane crashes, which we were required to investigate the deaths of those. They were spread over miles, and the old ways of doing it with 100-foot fiberglass tapes and things like that were just not apropos. And we evaluated. I was put in charge of the program for deciding on a piece of equipment that we could utilize for that. I went and talked to the county surveyor at that time, as well as the other subject matter experts, and came up with purchasing a GPS unit that was capable of doing centimeter accuracy, which would be compliant with what the prosecutor's office would expect from us. And so back in the day, we would use 2 to 3 detectives to measure a scene where we're stretching fiberglass tapes, or we're using a LiDAR or some other type of singular measuring device. And we decided on using a GPS device because it freed up those other 2 bodies. We were able to utilize that as a single evidence gathering item utilized by 1 detective. And so we found that we had an increase in our productivity with the ability of processing complex scenes faster. We freed up other personnel then to be utilized in other places, you know, like photography or the actual picking up and gathering of the evidence. And what we had come up with and purchased when we approached the commissioners in 2010 was the Ashtec commercial GPS. This is different than the ones you would purchase in the store, in the fact that those have like 3 to 5 feet at best of accuracy, whereas this one can drill down to literally inch or sub-inch accuracy. And if I may approach you, I'd let you look at this. We purchased this unit in 2010 and have utilized it pretty much on every outdoor scene that we've had. So we've had suicides, Sergeant Greg Moore's homicide, as well as a number of other officer-involved shootings and uses of forces. We've utilized that piece of equipment beyond its life expectancy from the company. We've taken care of it. We've just done our best to maintain that. However, we're probably about 5 to 7 years outside of its life expectancy. The company no longer makes those. There's no product support for it. even the operating system, a Windows operating system, Windows will no longer support that. So we've taken care of it. We've been a good steward of the equipment that the commissioners allowed us to buy, but we've just simply worn it out. We've gone beyond it. So again, the accuracy rate was starting to fall off. We approached the company. There was nothing they could do for us. So I contacted the chain of command and said, we need to purchase another one. We need to replace this piece of equipment. It's a necessary and critical piece that we utilize on a regular and routine basis. So again, I went to the subject matter experts. I contacted the county surveyor as well as Dave Christensen and the GIS group. Went through and sought their expert opinion, what we need, what kind of stuff will function with the rest of the county. So the stuff that they need for it to work with GIS, the stuff that the county surveyor would be able to take and utilize, the things that they would recommend. And through the evaluation process, we went through and found the Arrow Gold. It's made by EOS. This is, again, is a sub-centimeter accuracy GPS unit that is currently utilized commercially for surveying and professional stuff. The companies that have utilized it have seen a 50 to 75% increase in productivity by the use of this piece of equipment with their personnel. And I would expect that we would have the same type of expectation to have with this. They sent us a demo unit, and I took the demo unit around the county and tried it out. It functioned great. Matter of fact, there is a place in Kootenai County that GIS laughingly calls Oz, because it's just a place that you cannot get a GPS signal. It's notoriously hard to do any kind of surveying. I took the Arrow Gold there and was able to plot out points and send them to them, much to their surprise. So again, it is a significant increase in what we have. It is continuation of the same type of project, and the ease at which it basically folds in with the other stuff that we currently use and what the county uses would demonstrate that we're being a good steward with this money and have done the research and made sure that we're asking for something that is going to function and continue to function with what we have. There's a brief, like, 1-minute video that kind of shows it, and at the same time, I also have some printouts from there that kind of demonstrates what the unit is and what the company is projecting that the unit can do.
Ongoing cost?
The only ongoing cost that I could see would be it Bluetooth to a tablet, and that is a user interface. And so as the tablets would get older or non-supported, or you know how technology just kind of ages, would be the replacement of the tablet laptop, but I believe that would fall well within the purchase abilities of the Sheriff's Office itself. The unit itself, it relies on what's called an RTK, which is real-time kinematic. It relies on corrections broadcast to it via cellular network. County already has access to a CORS RTK network, and so therefore there'd be no expenditures for that. So the unit itself is a singular purchase, and the maintenance on it would be minimal, only if it breaks or if something is out of
Okay,
warranty.
so question, you also
Yes, sir.
have 2 drones. Do you typically use those drones in crime investigation or
Yes, sir.
accidents or whatever?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay, how many people are trained for the use of the drones?
7, including myself.
Okay, would the drones also work in conjunction with this device?
Yes, sir. They would fold seamlessly. The data would be able to be laced together.
Okay.
Can you use the drones in place of this?
Well, after 26 years of law enforcement, I've found that there's no panacea for everything. And so there's not one tool that we could buy that will do it all. This would not obviously work inside of a house, and so we would need to use another technology inside of a house. But in the areas where we have in the county, where it's out in the open and stuff like that, if we have a heavy tree canopy, this would be able to get the GPS signals through the heavy tree canopy, whereas the drone may not be able to see and photograph downward in enough specificity that would allow us to make a crime scene diagram.
So would this device be attached to the drone?
No, sir. It's basically a monopod with an antenna, the GPS unit itself, and a tablet that goes from
Okay,
point
so
to point.
you're working with satellite signals?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay.
Yes, sir. And again, we've been using this type of technology since 2010, and we've used it with a level that it has worked on pretty much every major scene we've had. The shooting we had on I-90, again, Sergeant Moore's homicide scenes, and it is so far proven itself to be an invaluable tool, not only utilized by us, but the Idaho State Police, Coeur d'Alene Police Department, Post Falls. All of those units, or excuse me, all of those agencies have asked us to come in with that older unit and assist them in there, just because of the speed in which we can mark points and the ease at which that data is transferred over. This unit has even an easier way that as soon as I get into the local area, it automatically takes the data that I've collected and transfers it to a spot that GIS is designated in our computer system. So that, as well as with the county commissioners, if we had a natural disaster or if there was a spot that needed to be marked for a map, for a demonstratable aid, that stuff would be able to provide it to you in almost real time.
Now, they've got 4 different models.
Yes, sir.
Which one are we talking about?
We're talking about the Aero Gold, which is the one that has the real-time kinematic. The other ones don't.
This is the top of the line.
Yes, sir. The RTK allows us to have the sub-centimeter accuracy. Now, additionally, with that, starting on the East Coast in the United States and moving this way ever closer every year is a standard, a CALIA standard, that's specific for law enforcement, and it branches over a bunch of different areas. The CALIA standard, when it comes to crime scene measurements, is 1/4 of an inch. And so that is going to be the expectation in the next 10 years, is that we're going to have enough specificity when measuring crime scenes that we would be able to show to a defense attorney or to a civil attorney or somebody else that we have fell within that standard.
Okay. So how much are we talking about?
I believe the
10,396.
Yeah, 10,726. When we purchased the Ashtec, I want to say its singular cost was approximately $7,000, and then the equipment to go with it, the external antenna, the pole, and everything else, probably rounded up about $9,000.
Okay, and recurring cost?
The only recurrent cost would be, as I had stated, would be the tablet, which is the user interface, so a computer tablet, but I believe that's a lesser enough expense that the Sheriff's Office would be able to pay for that without Commissioner approval.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
If you'd like to see the videos, no sound? Certainly, and I can explain as we go if there's further questions as far as the
okay, let's do it.
limitations or capabilities. EOS is a company out of Canada. However, the companies that provide the support as well as the sales are located in Oregon. And this is the same company that we purchased the Ashtec GPS from. And we've had really good training and support. They were able to come here, do the training, and as well as actual person support. I actually had a number for a person to call if we had problems. The county surveyor is also really interested in this, as well as GIS. They were pretty impressed with the overall quality of the unit. So that gives you kind of an idea. It shows the monopod, the external antenna, and then, of course, the unit itself. That's good. Is there any questions before I step down? Thank you.
Thank you.
You can see why I brought the expert. There's a lot of technical information there. So that is the capital request. As we said, it's a $10,397 request.
Okay.
Non-capital requests are listed here. There's just a few things that we need for the office and for the detectives to work. Standalone high-speed computer station is needed for a variety of different things, from recording videos and doing any copying of those videos for public records requests. We need some binoculars to replace old worn-out ones, desks for our employees to stand or sit to be able to choose to do those things. Digital cameras just to upgrade some things. A mobile fingerprint scanner so that we can do that in the field and get information, and then some equipment needs that we have for the drones. We do have a wish list, the B list items as it's called, and those are things that we would like to have, but we did not include in this budget year given the circumstances. Last year we asked for the administrative assistant position for the detectives, and this would be the second year had we put this in. And we also did not include a request for mobile tablets for detectives, as Detective Northrup told you we would need one for this unit, but we could probably afford to get one within our current budget. Otherwise, there are no 5-year plans for that item. And we get to the professional standards and investigation support budget. This is both the A and B budget here for you to see. We don't have any A budget requests in this line item. It is a new line item, so we're trying to build that as we can. What we've done is taken the personnel that are assigned to that and moved them from the other organizational codes that they were in into this particular one. B budget line items that are posted were either removed from the administrative line items for the Sheriff's Office admin budget, as I had stated earlier, so they existed and those dollar amounts were removed from one org set and put into this one. We had a few that were increased from a zero-based budget to an amount just so that we could establish a base budget in those areas, and those were for training specifically. And a couple of like motor vehicle amounts and for fuel and repairs. So this gives you an idea of what those were. The impact for our new org set is $12,032, with 5,357 being non-cap requests. And those, we do have I'll get to those in a moment, but we do have one capital request, which is large. And this is for the architect fees for the work release center remodel. Currently, that is the area where the coroner has moved to, and we've also completed an evidence area remodel to that. There are 2 dorms in the middle from where the coroner and the evidence currently exists. And those 2 dorms in the middle, if we built the current half mezzanine floors all the way out, we could take advantage of the space in there and have 2 big offices that are 2 floors. And so the idea is to be able to move basically this whole division, our detectives, our background, our training unit, everybody could go over to that area. And the domino effect is that once we vacate the detectives area, the jail could roll into that with their plans of looking into a work release program and a place for the sheriff's community labor program to check in. So there's an idea for use for that area. The areas that we would vacate over in the Compton building, the old adult misdemeanor probation building, if you're familiar with that area, would allow for our civil unit to be able to go over there. It's already designed to be able to greet people from the public with some ballistic protection, and then records could move fully into where civil currently is. So it tries to get some people that are currently housed in, closets and such out of those areas, give our agency a little bit more room to grow. And it's not a perfect fix, it's a Band-Aid, but it's something that we're trying to accomplish for the future.
Is this part of the 5-year plan that Under Sheriff and maybe Sean had sat down and mapped out?
Yeah, we put together a list of priorities of move areas that we wanted to try to accomplish, and this was one of the higher priority areas that we had at that time. There was about 74,000 or 78.
We had originally set aside some money for architecture for the admin addition. We had since, they took that off the table and that got moved to the Vehicle Evidence Processing Center. So if memory serves me right, we sat down a couple years ago and did a plan, and it was admin, and then it was, I'm trying to remember because it was on the whiteboard. It was admin, and then it was detectives, and then it was evidence processing, and then it was work release going to the jail. Am I right on that? And then they flipped it, so it went to detectives first as far as the evidence, because the jail expansion, as you know, took away their processing, what little bit of processing they had. So that was the plan in the beginning. Yeah.
Okay.
So you know that if you do the math on that 225 by 6728, that comes out to $1.5 million for that project.
Which in that 5-year plan we put in for next year as a marker.
Okay.
Any other questions on this capital? Then we have the non-cap requests. The weapons storage rack is an item that we requested last year. We remeasured with some changes that we've done, remodeling of the evidence area, and we are requesting a smaller storage rack this year. But it gives us the ability to store quite a number of firearms in a more compact and safe manner. And then the $718 is an Easy Flex Sport Training mat purchase. It's a few mats that we can utilize for our physical testing. When we are hiring new people, we need some safe areas for them to do that. And then also using that or those mats for training for arrest techniques and defensive techniques training. We currently don't have any areas to be able to use those in. Questions? No. B list items, the wish list. We didn't include the training and crime prevention technician and the sergeant that we requested last year. And we did not include a new request for a power lift for evidence, to get evidence up to that second floor mezzanine in the new evidence area. The one that they currently use is broken down more than it's in working order. And they're having a tough time maintaining it and keeping it in working order. So it's mostly just furniture at this point. The 5-year plan does include, if you look towards that 5-year plan, it has a service agreement for the live scan fingerprint machine in it, not for this year or next year, but for the last 3 years, 23, 24, and 25, because the grant that we purchased that on will be completed, and we'll have to take on the service fees for that the service agreement fees at that point. And then it also, as I said, has the work release capital request for $1.5 million. Any questions?
Yeah, I guess I have a question for Dina. The $1.5 million, is that, anyway, is that part of the $6.5 million deficit or no? Are these wish lists?
These last few items are wish lists looking forward at a 5-year capital plan.
Okay.
And they are not included in 21's budget.
Okay. I have to admit, this is the first time I've seen a wish list that's not necessarily part of next year's budget, but it's like saying, look what we could have asked for.
It was the B list,
Yeah,
I guess,
get
is
it.
what,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay.
Commissioner, can I speak a little bit to that wish list? Because you've seen it in everybody's budget. And, when we sat down earlier this year to prepare our budget, we were told, the way we were going to travel, whether we agree with that 2% or not, we tried to stay that way.
Sure.
And, in years gone by, we've taken the position that, very often, if we need it, we just ask for it. But what we decided to do this time was say, look, this is the parameters that the board set for us, and we didn't want to, excuse the expression, we don't want to poke anybody in the eye by coming to you and ask for all kinds of crazy stuff that we know that you either didn't have the money to provide or that circumstances just wouldn't allow to happen. So what we did, because we serve many masters, we serve the public, we serve, our employees expect things of us, and certainly there has to be some record of the fact that we're letting you know what we need, even though we can't have it right now. So that is why we created that B list, just to say, look, number one, we're letting you know that this is out there, and we're going to ask for it sometime down the road, but we understand you're saying don't ask for it now, so we didn't. So I just wanted to explain that. It's come up a couple different times, and Chris, you just mentioned it, so I figured I'd catch it.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Recap of the morning presentation for new asks.
I think we have Captain Street. Are you
Does
ready?
anybody want to? I'd rather do away with new asks, but
Oh, I think Captain Street, do you have a presentation?
okay, so you're saying we essentially covered them, or did we? Oh,
What we
okay.
did was we built in this working agenda to have you see some presentations, take a little break, and then maybe have a discussion, a deeper discussion about some of the asks while the captains are here. And then we were gonna do a lunch and come back, and then Captain Street has his presentation. So since we've accelerated that timeline.
Yeah, I'd like to wrap it up by noon if we can. I think at this point, to even attempt a cursory deliberation would be premature, unless Leslie and Bill feel differently, but I need to digest some of this information. I mean, I can look at this right and say, okay, I'm ready to cut, but I don't want to do that at this point because I don't think that would be fair to the process.
Chris, Matt had some, Captain Street had some stuff he was gonna bring in, but I understand you wanna move it forward, and Matt and I talked about this ahead of this, about that possibility that you may wanna move forward, so, are you feel okay, Matt?
I'm ready to call off talk right now, I just need to, if I'm up, I'm gonna press send.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
And I'll explain what is what.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. No, I think, you know, really to try to attempt anything at this point, you know, would be premature in terms of taking a critical look at things because I don't want to be premature. I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to short circuit the process, so. And again, you know, we have a changing dynamic here because the guidelines that were given when we started the process, I guess, what is it now, a couple of months ago, was kind of pre-COVID. COVID enters the picture, now we have a whole new dynamic. Don't know how much is going to settle out, but what is interesting, and I just heard this morning, if you look at the, I don't know if it's the CARES Act, but the actual distribution of federal funds per infected individual, the top 3 states are Florida, Idaho, and California. Ohio, I'm sorry. Florida, Ohio, and Idaho. So we're going to be getting something like $18,000 per individual that was infected. I don't know how that's going to shake out when it gets down to the county level, but that's sort of the latest as of this morning. That was on the news, by the way. So, Captain, you ready?
Michelle's running this one, so it's gonna be way better.
I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
Okay, let's see.
Will I see if the clicker works, because I don't think it was working for.
Yes. Okay, well, good morning, Commissioners. I had planned on saying I've been preparing all week to say good afternoon, Commissioners, and now it's good morning. So, I'm here to present just a snapshot of primarily the B budget of the Patrol Division of the Sheriff's Office. And this is the first time that I've had the opportunity to work in PowerPoint or with PowerPoint for many years, and so I was actually enjoying it and feeling successful about my little things that I were able to incorporate into the presentation. And so we're going to talk about the Patrol Division B budget.
Okay.
And this is a one-slide presentation. Well, the presentation is like 25 slides, but this particular slide captures all of the individual budgets that we have that fall under Patrol Division. So, but for the patrol deputies and the budget that they work within, we were almost able to achieve and stay within the confines of the 2% cap. We went over by $927. When you consider all of the other budgets that fall within my division, everything else was met the 2% cap. It didn't exceed it, or in some cases were under. So our animal control budget, we were able to stay within the 2% cap that was requested of us. The OHV budget, the same. The SWAT budget, the same. Our search and rescue budget, we were able to stay within that cap. Our snowmobile budget actually was reduced by 21% for FY21. And our vessel account was, or our vessel fund, which is like our Marine Division, was
was reduced by almost a little over 0.5%. So all in all, out of all of those budgets, we exceeded by 927 in the full budget.
Okay.
So I wanted to just share a call with you guys, just to try to put it into perspective what the uniform division, our patrol division does for the county. And you all might remember this. I probably need to stay in front of the speaker, right? I'm a rover usually. You might remember this call. I'm going to try not to use any names just because I know it's a public meeting and I don't want to expose any individual. But on the day of November 7th, 2019, there was a male individual that was here on campus for a court proceeding. Hello? Does that work? Okay. I'll keep that handy. He was sitting in his pickup truck in the north parking lot right over here, just to the north of us on the county property. And in my mind, trying to make a decision what he wanted to do, if he wanted to participate in the hearing or not. And unbeknownst to anybody at the time, but he had an AR-15 rifle sitting next to him in the truck, front seat of the truck. And so he did not show up at the hearing, he did not attend, and the judge issued a bench warrant for this person. So you're all familiar with Deputy Douglas, who's our admin deputy down here. And when this gentleman did not appear in court, he learned that the judge had issued a bench warrant for him. And we were able to get a couple of deputies in place and notice that after we noticed that he was in the parking lot. So while we were waiting for additional resources to arrive, we were concerned about whether or not he was armed or not, because we've had quite a lengthy history with dealing with this individual. So we want to make sure we had our backup there. Well, he decides that he's going to leave. And so Deputy Douglas attempts a traffic stop on this man, and he doesn't stop. He fails to yield, and a pursuit gets started. So I'm going to show you two different separate videos of the pursuit from two different cameras and camera lenses, or camera angles. So this one is Deputy Traw trying to catch up with the pursuit on Northwest Boulevard. And I'll try to narrate as we go along, but essentially they're going to, he's going to get caught up to Deputy Douglas and Deputy Dooley as they're going outbound on Northwest Boulevard. And do we have any audio, Michelle? Yeah, we turned it down. Okay. And as he catches up to the other units here at this stoplight coming. But the sirens kind of help get everybody excited about this stuff. So Deputy Traw is driving the vehicle that this camera is in, and Deputy Dooley is right in front of him, and Deputy Douglas, whom you're familiar with, is in the larger SUV on the right, and they're going out on Northwest Boulevard. Now, Deputy Dooley is going to attempt at some point here in the near future a pit maneuver, which is a pursuit intervention technique, which essentially they're going to try to spin the suspect out of control and then block him, and so he can no longer evade the traffic stop. Pardon? How he re-injured him.
You're trying to hit right now, we can't. 63, do you know that number? You ready?
Meanwhile, he's got his flashers on.
Yeah, he's not driving, he's about 40 miles an hour. You can see as the deputy right behind him starts to get in position, the suspect moves over and anticipates the pit maneuver, and he's trying to avoid it.
Right.
Try to do it on the left side, so we can avoid oncoming traffic. Direction right side. Okay. Also, he's on 911 now. Okay.
We don't find that out until after the fact. You know, we knew he had a history of being armed, but we don't know or have confirmation that he has that yet. So Michelle, can you drag what I want to do is fast forward it quite a bit, because what you see is this, and he gets on the freeway, and then there's 5 minutes of freeway driving, at the same time, no action. And I want to fast forward to where it gets fun again. You have to grab it and drag it all the way to the end.
Traffic is light, speed right now, 15 miles to 30 miles an hour.
Why can't we have other budget sessions like this?
Let's get some action.
Oh my goodness.
To grab that slippery southeast or so northbound.
Going over the median.
Driving into oncoming traffic with his flashers on.
6341, I gotta pick up. So this might work better.
Well, continue with your presentation.
The end of the video is really interesting, and so that's what I want you guys to see.
I-90 westbound. Could be a 490 from westbound. Copy. 4389 is the eastbound I-90. That's okay. Yeah, is that okay for no bed?
Were you able to fast forward at all?
No.
Anyway.
Turn down the sound so you can continue.
Well, there's just, I can, after the two videos, there's a slide that says something to the effect of the decisions that you guys have to make as commissioners. And when I'm referring to our B budget, and I think of our training that we provide to the deputies, the equipment that we provide to them, and this video is, in my mind, is designed to capture some of those things that we actually do, and those things cost money. Everything from hiring and retaining good people to providing good quality training to deal with situations like this that are occurring frequently in our community. And I had part of my display here that was scheduled for this afternoon is I was going to have 3 deputies present, one wearing a class or a honor guard uniform, one wearing a class B uniform, and one wearing a class C uniform. I wanted to point out that, just as an example, our uniform budget request this year is $40,000, which is the same as what it was for FY20. And however, I just want to point out, like, an honor guard uniform is almost $1,600 just to buy the uniform for one honor guard. To completely outfit one deputy in a uniform, from his boots all the way up to the headgear, to include the uniform shirt, the duty belt, the holster, is about $960. I'm sorry, it's 1,000. I have it on my slide. I think it's 1,065. That doesn't include the ballistic vest, which is approximately $800, $900. The handgun that goes with it.
Got it.
So to outfit a person in the uniform is roughly $1,000. And also, we're trying to phase in our uniform budget, the ability for the sheriff's office to be able to provide their C-class uniform, which is their jumpsuit. And up until this budget year, deputies have been purchasing their own jumpsuit. And they're about $600 a piece. And so what we're doing this year is we're trying to offset some of those costs and provide partial purchase for those.
Okay.
And so we're going to try to continue that program into the future years and let that uniform budget grow to the point to where we can accommodate actually buying those uniforms uniforms for the deputies instead of having them do it themselves. So, getting back to the video, we're heading westbound towards Post Falls, and they're coming over the hill towards Highway 41. Are you familiar with the location?
Yes.
Recognize it? Okay. And so out ahead at the Greens Ferry overpass, Deputy Kramer is lying in wait there, and traffic is being slowed down. They're coming up with a plan on how to stop this pursuit. And I believe that Deputy Kramer is poised to deploy spike strips, which will theoretically puncture the tires of this vehicle and cause it to slow down. The top speed of the suspect here on the freeway, as I recall, was only about 75 or 80 miles an hour. It wasn't super fast, but it was fast enough where we don't want to try another pit maneuver at those speeds. So you're going to see as Deputy Traw is chasing him down the interstate, I believe the suspect observes Deputy Kramer sitting on under the overpass, and he decides to cross through the median and into oncoming traffic. And if you notice, there's quite a bit of eastbound traffic coming. And so these deputies and they have gone through emergency vehicle operations training, which all of our deputies do, and so this is just an emphasis on the importance of being able to provide that training, and it's pretty reoccurring. You don't have to do it every year, but you want to have repeat training so you get, maintain those skills of how to drive in these conditions at speeds that the normal folks don't do. So Deputy Kramer does a U-turn on the median there, and he's going to confront him head on here. And he's intentionally hitting the suspect and forcing him off the road. So the video stops there, and there's the total video length is 53 minutes, but we stopped the video here because you can see what's happening right here. The first deputy's out of the car, and he's coming up to address the suspect there. And that's when we determined that he's got the AR-15 sitting there right in his driver's side seat. What we ended up doing is containing him, and he would not get out of the car. We eventually deployed a canine. Canine went in the car, and then he came out peacefully. So let's move on to the next video. This is a much shorter video, and this is from the viewpoint of Deputy Kramer, who is lying in wait at Greens Ferry and I-90. So go ahead and press play if you can.
That's a pretty bold move.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So at the end of Deputy Traw's video, you show him and he's face-to-face with the suspect. So a couple of things could have happened. Suspect could have, like he didn't do anything, and we ended up getting him out of the car eventually. Or it very easily could have been, pulling up the AR and engaging the deputies right there through the windshield. Another thing I want to point out is this man was waiting in your parking lot right here, and in my mind, there's a couple of different decisions that were being made. Do I go into the building and either go to court or, take some violent action, or do I I stay in my car and do I leave? We're fortunate, all of us are fortunate that he left. And that's why I wanted to show this particular video, because you guys were all probably familiar with this situation, and it kind of brings it home for you, because you have a connection to this particular case. So here's what I had previously talked about. It just emphasizes the need to hire good people and retain them, provide funding for quality training, funding for equipment and supplies, and then our general uniform costs here, about almost $1,600 for our honor guard, $1,100 for our Class B, and about $663 for that Class C jumpsuit. The duty belt, of course, is interchangeable, which makes that cost a little bit less. Class B is a traditional sheriff's uniform, tan top, green pants.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. If you want to class it up a little bit, you put a tie on, make it a Class A. Any questions about that segment?
No.
Okay,
Very
we're gonna-
interesting.
We're going
Thank
to
you.
switch topics. This is the second year in a row we're asking to create a new cost center for our dive team. Much like the SWAT team or our OHV or snowmobile, we would like to have a budget for the dive team. And it does not have a budget like the SWAT team. That's probably the easiest comparison. So this is just a picture of our team. Most of our team members are on the right side of the picture in the red dry suits, and some fire personnel on the left in the yellow, and they were training ice rescue. Those plastic platforms there are called Rescue Alives, and you're able to straddle hold on to the parallel bars and run out across the ice, and when you're about ready to fall through, you can hop up onto the pontoons and stay afloat. So our dive rescue team, the response areas are 18 lakes and over 50 miles of navigable river here in our county, and that doesn't include any private ponds, swimming pools, drainage ditches, etc. Some of the work that our dive team does is they do evidence collection for both felony and misdemeanor crime scenes, open water rescue, swift water rescue, ice rescue, drowning recovery, suicide response, and technical boat operation. Our membership consists of 12 deputy positions that are on the team, 1 volunteer who happens to be a Hauser fire captain, Gary Mobbs. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. And then we have 4 shore support that help out on the shore. So I've just got a couple of photographs to share with you guys, just as examples of what the dive team does in some instances. The one on the left is Fernand Lake, and they're doing a recovery of a vehicle and checking the vehicle for any occupants. This vehicle drove off the road at Fernand Lake. The one on the right is a training for ice diving. The divers cut out a section of ice, and then people on the surface that are tending the lines that are attached to the divers, what they do is we call it flying a pattern, and so the person that's tending the line controls the movement of the diver. The diver's supposed to swim out a certain direction. When the line goes tight, they're supposed to take a turn to the right, and the diver or the tender controls how much line and controls the pattern, and they just do a sweeping pattern, and they go out incrementally further every pass until they search an area.
What's the deepest point in Fernand? Is it about 60?
In Fernand Lake?
Fernand Lake?
I don't recall the deepest point in Fernand. I know Coeur d'Alene, I believe, is somewhere
300?
around 190.
Oh, 190, okay.
And we've had cases in Bayview, sonar recoveries that are over 800, 900.
Oh, yeah.
So as you might expect, ice diving is very dangerous, and that line tending is not only to keep them on a pattern, but also to protect them if something were to happen down there. We can always pull them back to the cutout. Might be kind of difficult to see in the light. The picture on the left is a highline rope setup that is designed to take that raft, and you have a team on both sides of the river that can pull that raft to one side or the next, and then you deploy divers and other lines, rescue lines, out of the raft, and you control your search pattern in that manner. The picture on the right is some training on how to navigate swift water crossings as a team, so you don't fall down and get swept downstream. So that's a good way of crossing a river that's moving. So just a little bit of data and why we're asking for a new cost center for the dive team. Essentially what we're asking for is some seed money of $8,000 out of the general fund to get started in this budget. The reason we're asking for it out of the general fund is because up until this point, 100% of all of the dive-related expenses has been coming out of the vessel account, which I think is disproportionate to the actual use. So in 2018, we had 22 dive rescue team responses, and only 4 were related to boating. and 18 were related to non-boating incidences like drowning, vehicle crashes, and suicides, or equating out to about 18.2% of the total was related to boating, but 100% being paid for by boating dollars.
Do you not have 19 numbers?
Yeah, I was curious.
Yeah. So in FY19, there were 14 responses, 2 of which were related to boating incidents on the water, and 12 related to non-boating incidents, so about 14%. So far this year, there's been 8 responses by the dive rescue team. 1 was related to boating, and factoring out at 12.5%. Now, when I take all 3 years and all 3 percentages and average it, it's about 15%. So I think what I'm looking for in the end is to have a budget that is funded through the general fund by about 85% and vessel fund by 15%. So currently the vessel fund is covering 100% of the dive rescue team training and equipment purchases. On average, only 15% of all the dive responses are directly related to boating. And like I mentioned earlier, $8,000 is for initial startup only. Future budget requests will likely grow in order to sustain training and equipment needs.
Okay.
Any questions about that? I think I'm nearing the end. The end is, oh yeah, the horizon for the, on the horizon for the patrol division. So this is like what the other captains have talked about. This was what we anticipate in the future, and it's just to plant a seed in your mind of what we may be asking for coming down.
Is this the no growth plan?
This is the no growth, no money available plan. Yeah, yeah. So
the reason I say that is we get comments from people saying, when are you going to control the growth? And I'm thinking, oh my God, what are you asking?
So some of the things that are on our future request list is we would like to provide a stipend, a pay stipend for our lead deputy program because they're in a quasi-supervisory role and fill in the void when sergeants are gone. We would like to provide a stipend for our recreational safety deputies. Those are our Marine deputies and backcountry guys. They are married to that job, and I did that for 9 years, and it's your life, and you get called out a lot, and it's very disruptive. So we'd like to pay those guys for that. We want to take a look at increasing our uniform. We touched on that a little bit a few slides ago, but we want to start phasing in the ability to buy the uniform, all of the uniforms for the deputies instead of having them pay for them themselves. And part of that increase would include providing an outfit similar to this for them to attend formal trainings in instead of going in, whatever they decide to show up in, just to try to professionalize it a little bit. We have noticed as we have evolved into these smaller Ford SUVs that our outlying district deputies, those vehicles aren't ideal for the conditions that those deputies in the outlying areas are driving in. A lot of off-road conditions, mountain conditions, Forest Service roads, things like that. And so the ground clearance on those Ford SUVs that we're currently in, I kind of call them pandas just because they're black with the white doors, but those are actually, from what I've been told, a Ford Taurus with an SUV body, so the clearance is still 7 or 8 inches, so very, very low to the ground. Also, a TrueNarc narcotics analyzer, what we'd like to have in the future to analyze narcotics in the field, that costs about 60 grand. And then to maintain our SWAT equipment, about $19,000 spread across the entire SWAT budget, anything from replacing ballistic vests as they expire, helmets, things of that nature, and then some training as well. So those are just some costs that we've identified that, going down the road, someone, not me, will be maybe bringing those forth in future budget years. So, thank you very much. That's a picture from Laredo, Baja, Mexico.
Okay.
Last year.
Fishing there?
Beautiful place. Any questions?
Good presentation.
Radios? Can we talk about radios?
Sure.
Okay. So how many did we get last year? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I remember it was cut, and we bought. Shoot. Yeah, I'm not. I don't have that information.
Okay, I can look it up later.
it seems as though we asked for 20 and we were approved 12 or 14 is what, what I think, but I'm not sure entirely.
All right, and is this a 5-year plan, a 3-year plan? What's?
For
to
the
replace
purchase
them
of
all?
radios now?
Yeah.
Well, what we've requested now is what we anticipate having the need to be replaced
Right.
within the next 18 months. In FY21.
Okay. Any other questions for Captain Street? None?
I'm good.
Bill?
Thank you, Commissioners.
That was exciting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good, man.
Appreciate it. Okay, so let's see where we are. So we've skipped ahead. That was the presentation by Captain Matt Street. We were talking about potential new asks or whatever, but I think what we can do is, once again, if we're going to go through a recap, I don't know if there's any real sense in doing that unless you, Leslie, and Bill think you're ready to start discussing some of the specific items.
I'm fine either way.
Okay, I'm not ready to do that just yet. So, Under Sheriff Maros, did you want to make some closing comments? Or Sheriff Wolfinger?
Yes. So, for the record, we tried to be as cooperative as we could this year with the budget, and I want to stress that there's a lot of things that we could have asked for, and again, for the second time, that's why we got that wish list there, because I think there's a lot of people that believe that a lot of those things should be asked for, but right now, probably the money's not there. You've made it clear early on that you're going to hold us to that 2%. And while I was listening to the presentations, I took a moment to look at what the CPI was, and the CPI was at 2.3%, I think, at March, but now it's down to 1.5 by comparison. I think a lot of that's got to do with the COVID issue. And so I got to stress that I believe that the 2% and Bill, not to send you in the wrong direction, but the 2% is a fair way to have looked at this, and in particular because of the fact that we went into some very, very deep cuts last year with the purpose of trying to make sure that we kept wages as a priority. And in particular, and you probably saw this theme repeat itself during the presentations, that the training was a problem. And we got hit very, very deeply in training. We cut that back significantly. Tammy, do you remember offhand how much it got? Yeah, that was a huge hit. And so again, you know, when we talk about the fact that we're trying to cooperate, we try to stay within that 2%. I do think the 2% was fair in terms of the CPI, but also, you know, to cut us any deeper right now would really hurt because we're trying to put some of that money back towards training where we got cut last year. This year, and this is a sore subject, but I have to talk about it just briefly because I know it's a tough time with COVID, but every year our primary concern is wages. And I'm sure that you hear that from all the electeds, but you've seen and heard year after year that we lose people, and yeah, you know, a lot of the times when you look at the exit interviews, it's wages, and sometimes they don't like us. But whatever the case may be, we have to remain competitive. And and Ben, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think we're pretty square on this, is that our #1 priority going forward is wages. And I know we're not at that point right now, but for the record, I want to make it clear that, you know, to the extent possible, we want to remain competitive. And I also, you know, in deference to where you sit, I know that the revenues are probably going to be down this year, and that may be a touchy subject, but we're, you know, if we're going to ask, or if you're going to ask us what's most important, that's #1, wages and benefits, okay? Very briefly, because I got your point, Chris. Very briefly, you know, when we take a look at the B budget and the capital request on that printout that I gave you, I think most of those things were covered in the presentation by the captains. You know, on the admin budget, you're going to see those 20 cell phones. And,
Yes.
And
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that, and Tammy, that's just to pick up where we left off this year, right? Yeah, so that really wasn't touched on by any of the presentations, but basically, as you recall, during this current year's budget, we talked quite a bit about the need to issue cell phones, and we came up with a plan, and we didn't get all the way there. And so that's just a continuation of the plan that was put into place during the current, or rather the present fiscal year.
Okay.
Going down those capital requests, very, very briefly, we already talked about the consulate replacements. The Canfield microwave, is Colin still here? Did we speak to that?
Yeah.
We did, okay.
We talked about redundancy, and so.
Right,
you know, the
right.
Fiber cut and. Yeah,
Yes.
it's restricted
point.
funds.
The professional standards, again, you know, that goes to detectives as well. The work release center architectural fees, we spoke to that. We just talked moments ago about the 20 radios for patrol. The GPS was covered. All the things in the jail presentation were covered.
Yep.
Now, in the snowmobile and vessel accounts there, we didn't talk about that. And Matt, you want to speak to that real briefly?
Yeah, come on up, Matt. Yeah.
Yeah, those are, every year, if needed, our Recreation Safety section puts in for grants through the Idaho Parks and Recreation Program. And those grants require a 50% match. And so what we're trying to fund in the budget is the match for the grants when they get approved. I'm not sure the status of those. I know that they typically get approved in the spring or early summer, and so this is coming from dedicated funds anyway, and if the grants for some reason do not get approved, then of course those monies wouldn't be expended. That's the explanation of it.
So the 13,000 is the match?
The 13,000 is the match.
Okay.
Out of
And
restricted funds.
yes.
Okay.
And if you look down 2 lines below, the tow vehicle, the 22,406 out of the vessel account
Yeah.
will be for the match portion of the.
I have a question because, excuse me, in the way it's written in the request form is it's an $81,000 truck. So is that not what was supposed to be?
Well, I haven't seen that form, unless that form is inclusive of all of the equipment that goes on. Like, I remember a discussion when I was talking with Sergeant Klinkfuss, is the Waterways Improvement Fund grant, the people that fund that through Idaho Parks and Rec, is they didn't mind funding the tow vehicle, but they didn't want to fund all the peripheral equipment that
So I
went
think
with
the
it.
22,000 is for the supplies then maybe, or the.
Well, it's a
what goes on it.
required match. It's a
Right.
certain percentage of match that we're required to submit. I'd have to look at a breakout of the cost of what you're looking at to be able to
Okay.
answer that. But if it seems, yeah, I think if I would just be speculating if I tried to wing an answer out on that one.
Okay.
We do have the form in front of us.
Okay.
So the request description, the rec safety section is applied for a grant through the Idaho Department of Parks and Waterways.
Yeah?
This grant is for a new tow vehicle that is capable of towing a sonar boat and our new boat, the safe boat that was purchased last year. This grant request is for a total amount of $58,967, and we are requesting to supply a match of $22,406. So $22,406 is the request, but it sounds like, and we can validate this with the Lieutenant Higgins, that the request, the total cost is $58,967.
minus the-
Right.
Which
It's just
we are
worded,
supplying.
just worded a little funny that
Yes.
made me think.
Did your piece of paper say 85,000 though?
No. It's just if you add up the 58 plus the 22, you get about 81,000. So,
But you're saying it's 58 minus
Yes.
22?
okay, good, then that's fine. And when's the next boat
The next vote,
that you want?
the next boat quote?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh.
down 5
boy,
years, 2 years,
Probably within 5 years.
5 years.
I think our fleet is in pretty good shape, but our oldest boats are, I believe, our sonar boat's a 1991 vintage, and our jet streams that run the river are the Swiftwater portion of the river. Those are 1998 boats, and so they're really utilitarian. And so, other than replacing
the engines,
the linkage, steering linkage, and the engines, which are not cheap, but and the jet pumps, I mean, the hulls are aluminum hulls, and unless you damage them significantly, I mean, they're really durable. But you know, so I know that repowering those boats over the years, we've done it many times, and they just run out of gas, so to speak, and you got to put a new engine in there.
Okay.
This is a separate account than the rec safety, which funds the deputies to patrol the waters.
The Marine deputies?
Same account.
Same account.
Yeah. Same account. So the county vessel account
Mm-hmm.
funds both the B budget for the Marine deputies and a portion of the A budget, and also any capital requests that come around. And then we also get a recreational boating safety grant every year for, typically it's in excess of $100,000, and we try to spend that up front. And then if we need to, then we tap into the vessel account. So all of our Marine deputy wages, we try to split those out to where we exhaust all of that recreational boating safety grant money
Gotcha.
first.
Okay. Just making sure that it's not taking away from our funding of our deputy positions.
No, it's not.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan, did you want to? Yeah, please.
Just one final note. You know, I came here from Arizona, and I remember looking at the population of Kootenai County, because that's where I intended to go, in 1990. And I didn't come here till 1992, and I ended up in Sandpoint before I came here in 1995 in Kootenai County. But the population of Kootenai County in 1990 was about 69,000 and change. And I did a little research, but when I came to work for Kootenai County for the Sheriff's Office in 1995, 25 years ago, the population was 92,000. The population right now is 167,000. And if you add to that what the growth is in Spokane County, we have a metropolitan area that we're servicing of about 700,000 people, give or take. And that doesn't account for the people that are nearby in Shoshone County or Bonner County. And what's happening is that this isn't the same Kootenai County that it was 25 years ago. This isn't the same Kootenai County it was 10 years ago. The crooks don't care about the border there in Washington. And of course, we get a lot of people coming over from Washington to do their crime here. But I guess my point is that we are a metropolitan area dealing with metropolitan crime right now, and it's something that's going to become challenging, not just for the men and women that work in the jail and in the field, but it's going to become challenging even more so for the commissioners, because it's not going to stop. And so, you know, when we put these asks or we put these things out to you, and in particular this year, we were very reasonable in my view. I didn't want our staff to come forward with a bunch of ridiculous requests that they knew they weren't going to get funded. But those wish lists are for real, and I guess my point in putting a period at the end of this is that they're coming, and yeah, we got some challenging times, and I know that money's finite, but as we continue to move forward into the future, some things are just going to have to give somewhere, and I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work out, but again, we're growing, and we have to grow with it somehow. So. Sheriff, did you want to add to that? All right. I had captains. Anybody else? Anything that we forgot? And finally, I already said finally once, but I'll just say it one more time because I really mean it. But
that's okay.
I really,
keep going.
Yeah, the captains, they put this together, and I just think they did a good job.
Yeah, they certainly did.
And
Absolutely.
in particular, Tammy's the backbone of this. Tammy has worked with Dina. Dina's been great, as always, to work with Michelle. So it was a group effort, and hopefully this is something we can push on and do in the future. I think it's a good process. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else? Yes. We could call this public comment. Go right ahead.
Are you ready for public comment?
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right, I'm sorry, that's what I assumed you were at.
Go ahead.
I appreciate this process, and it looks familiar to last year's process, so I'm assuming that this is the process as all things being normal. But all things are not normal, as by our seating arrangements makes that very obvious. What I have not heard today is any contingency as to moving forward with our current situation as it is and revenues being down. I would guess that revenue collections are already down in the few weeks we've been into this and are only going to get precipitously worse. So what I was looking for today was contingency plans on the budget going backwards under this current situation, because as it moves forward, we already have thousands of people unemployed, approaching 30 million nationwide. The fallout of that is very obvious to the lack of collections, bankruptcies, foreclosures, tax liens across the board trying to get the money in the budget that you're anticipating and talking about very likely is not going to exist. So I think it would not be outside the realm of reality to start looking at 10%, 20%, 30% reductions to maintain service with our current situation. And the longer this situation is enforced, and that's where the key component of this is, it's being enforced in this county and not in other counties and not across the country, people are still allowed to make a living, feed their families, and pay their taxes. So as long as we continue that oppressive enforcement, we're going backwards, not forwards, and this process is an exercise in fruition. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That was Rick Whitehead, by the way, candidate for sheriff. Did you? I don't think you gave your name, so. I didn't. I know they logged me. Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate that, Rick. Anybody else would care to comment? No? Leslie, any thoughts? Bill? I'll just share a couple of thoughts pursuant to Dan's presentation, Dan Mattos, Undersheriff. When you talk about wages, and I think we essentially, and that you're absolutely right, that is a key component. Retention is a key component. Whatever's happening with COVID and the revenue situation, we're well aware that we need to retain. And there's no question. And I think we put our best foot forward last year. And for the benefit of anybody that might be watching or listening in, when we took the 3% last year, which was 1.4 million, and then you add the new growth, which was 1.2, the total was about 2.4, of which approximately 1.7 went to employees and just under 1 million to KCSO, to our sheriff's deputies. And I certainly think that was the right thing to do at the time. This is, and I think as Rick just pointed out, we have a new paradigm this year. We're operating under extenuating circumstances. We really don't know what the fallout's going to be. We don't know what the revenue impact is going to be unless, Dina, you have some idea. I think at this point, go right ahead.
Well, when we get into deliberations, which will start on June.
In June sometime, yeah?
Yeah, so stay tuned for, we'll be taking a deep dive. I'm hoping for a meeting next Friday to strategize our deliberations and how those are going to roll out. But one of those deliberations days will be a deep dive into revenue sources and revenue projections. And I think that will be a good time to attend, or at least to tune in to that discussion and talk about ideas and just throw ideas out there and try to brainstorm how we get through this. We just, like you said, we just don't know at this point. But it is scheduled for part of your deliberations is to get our arms around what we're looking at and game plan some different scenarios for you.
Yeah, the latest information that I have, and once again, I'll ask Dina to correct me if I'm wrong, is from the federal government, the state of Idaho is to receive somewhere around $1.2 billion. The governor plans to distribute somewhere around $40 million to the counties, and my understanding is approximately $4 million of that would come to Kootenai County. Where it goes, how we apportion it, what is it tied to, what are the restrictions, I don't think we know yet. And again, I'll ask Dina to chime in, but that's sort of the latest information. Don't know what kind of an impact that's going to have in terms of revenue and expenses. But Dina, did you want to jump in here?
We've put together a cross-functional team, RMO, auditor, and our tax analyst, and we're going to sit down and go through the documentation and try to figure out how this is supposed to be distributed. It's not real clear in the literature we've received, so we're going to put our heads together latter part of this week and into next week and come back with a summary for you.
Okay, good. And that's key. So when Dina refers to RMO, that's the Resource Management Office, what used to be known as grants. They still handle grants for many of our departments. So they, along with Dina, the auditor department, and anyone else that is a positive contributor is going to have a hand in this. So we'll have a better idea. Thank you, Dina. Anything else? Thank you, everyone. Good presentations, great effort. Thank you for trying to keep things under control. We truly appreciate it. We're far better off this year at this stage of the game, where we're running at about a $6.5 million deficit. That is to say, that's what's being projected over and above what we expect to collect. At this time last year, we were probably looking at 17 to 19 million over. So thank you for the effort. It's a great effort. We're making progress. And 11:14, meeting adjourned. Thanks.